Beneath California's Sierra Nevada, a mountain range so vast it stretches more than 400 miles from north to south, and so tall its peaks scrape 14,000 feet into thin air, there exists a hidden world that few people know about and even fewer have entered. A network of tunnels, caves, shafts, and chambers, some natural and carved by water over millions of years, others dug by human hands in circumstances that remain mysterious and contested, extends through the granite heart of these mountains like veins through stone. Some of these passages are documented, mapped, and understood. They are the remnants of gold rush mining operations, the industrial scars of a frenzied era when men tore into the earth seeking fortune. But others, perhaps dozens, perhaps hundreds, appear in no official record, correspond to no known claim, and suggest origins and purposes that do not fit comfortably into accepted history. There are tunnels found deep in wilderness areas, far from any gold rush activity, engineered with a sophistication that seems inconsistent with 19th century prospectors working alone. There are shafts descending into darkness, their depths unknown, their walls bearing tool marks that some researchers claim predate European arrival in California. There are chambers decorated with symbols that match no known indigenous tradition and no colonial pattern, geometric designs and inscriptions that have resisted every attempt at interpretation. And there are the stories passed down through generations of miners, indigenous peoples, and mountain dwellers. Stories of gold so pure it could be carved with a knife of mines that were found and then lost, and could never be relocated, of tunnels that seem to shift and change their configurations, of sounds emanating from deep underground that have no identifiable source, and of people who entered these passages and either never returned or emerged changed, traumatized, unable or unwilling to describe what they encountered. The Sierra Nevada is famous for its visible grandeur, the soaring granite domes of Yosemite, the alpine lakes of the High Sierra, the giant sequoias that have stood for thousands of years. But beneath that iconic surface lies a darker, stranger landscape, one that has swallowed human lives and human certainty, one that continues to yield discoveries that challenge our understanding of California's past and the capabilities of those who came before us. This is not a story about treasure hunting, although treasure is woven through it. This is a story about what happens when geology, history, and mystery collide, when the physical evidence refuses to align with the documented record, when the ground beneath our feet contains secrets that resist the tools of modern science and the assumptions of conventional archaeology. We will journey into the geological origins of these mountains, understanding how their formation created the conditions for both gold deposition and labyrinthine cave systems. We will trace the indigenous histories, the accounts of peoples who lived with these mountains for millennia and who speak of places beneath the surface that were sacred, forbidden, and dangerous in ways that transcend the physical. We will follow the Spanish explorers and Mexican miners who first brought European eyes to the Sierra and who left fragmentary records of discoveries they could not or would not fully document. We will examine the gold rush era when hundreds of thousands of people flooded into these mountains. When some found wealth beyond imagining and others found only death, when the landscape was transformed by human hunger, and when rumors of lost mines began to crystallize into legends that persist to this day. We will investigate specific sites. The lost cement mine, whose story has tormented searchers for more than 150 years, the mysterious tunnels of the Northern Sierra that appear to serve no mining purpose, the cave systems that extend for unknown distances into the mountain's interior, and the modern discoveries that continue to complicate rather than clarify the picture. We will confront the deaths, the disappearances, and the strange phenomena reported by those who venture into these underground spaces, experiences that range from the merely unsettling to the utterly inexplicable, and we will attempt, with full acknowledgement of the limits of knowledge, to understand what all of this means, what the forbidden tunnels of the Sierra Nevada reveal about history, about human ambition and limitation, and about the landscape itself. A landscape that seems at times to be not merely the passive stage for human activity, but an active participant with agency and intent of its own. The Sierra Nevada keeps secrets. Some are geological, some are historical, and some may be neither or both. What follows is an attempt to catalog those secrets, to trace their origins, and to understand why, despite centuries of exploration and more than 150 years of intensive study, the mountains beneath the mountains remain largely unknown, unmapped, and in places that matter most, utterly forbidden. If this mystery calls to you, as it has called to so many before, if you find yourself drawn to the hidden places and the unanswered questions, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This investigation represents months of research, consultation with geologists, historians, and indigenous knowledge keepers, and careful analysis of primary sources, maps, and first-hand accounts. Your support makes it possible to continue exploring these forgotten corners of history and bringing their stories to light. Now we begin where all stories of mountains must begin, with the violent forces that created them and the mineral wealth those forces left behind. The Sierra Nevada is not ancient in the way that the Appalachian Mountains are ancient, worn down by time into gentle slopes. The Sierra is geologically young, aggressive, still rising, a range built by violence and shaped by ice. And it is this youth and violence that created both the visible landscape and the hidden world beneath. The story begins more than 200 million years ago, in the Mesozoic era, when the oceanic plate carrying the Pacific Ocean began sliding beneath the continental plate of North America, a process geologists call subduction. As the oceanic plate descended into the Earth's mantle, it melted, and that molten rock, less dense than the surrounding material, began to rise. It did not reach the surface to form volcanoes, at least not primarily. Instead, it cooled slowly deep underground, crystallizing into vast bodies of granite, intrusive igneous rock that would eventually form the core of the Sierra Nevada. Over tens of millions of years, these granite plutons, individual bodies of crystallized magma, merged and expanded, creating a batholith, a massive underground mountain range of solid granite. Above this growing batholith, older sedimentary and metamorphic rocks, the original surface of the region, were pushed upward, heated, and transformed by the intrusion below. Then, beginning around 25 million years ago and accelerating dramatically in the last 5 million years, the entire block of granite began to tilt and rise. The western slope lifted gradually, while the eastern escarpment shot upward along fault lines, creating the dramatic, near-vertical eastern face of the Sierra that rises abruptly from the Owens Valley. This uplift was not smooth or uniform. It was fractured by faulting, cracked by the stress of movement, and punctuated by volcanic activity along the range's edges. As the mountains rose, erosion began its work. Water, freezing and thawing in cracks, pried the granite apart. Rivers carved canyons thousands of feet deep. And then, in the Pleistocene epoch, beginning about 2 million years ago, came the ice. Glaciers formed in the high country, rivers of ice that scoured the granite, carving the iconic U-shaped valleys, polishing the domes, and creating the dramatic alpine landscape we see today. But erosion and glaciation did more than shape the surface. They exposed what had been hidden deep underground, bringing ancient rocks to the surface, opening fractures and fissures, and revealing the mineral wealth that had crystallized in the cooling magma and circulated through the fractures in hydrothermal fluids millions of years before. Gold in the Sierra Nevada exists primarily in two forms. The first is lode gold, gold that remains in the original rock where it formed, typically quartz veins that cut through the granite and metamorphic rocks. These veins were created when superheated, mineral-rich water, driven by the residual heat of the cooling batholith, circulated through cracks in the surrounding rock. As the water cooled or its chemistry changed, the dissolved minerals precipitated out, filling the cracks with quartz, gold, silver, and other metals. These veins can be incredibly rich, with gold sometimes visible as wire or flakes within the white quartz, or they can be subtle, with the gold disseminated in microscopic particles invisible to the naked eye. The second form is placer gold, gold that has been eroded out of the lode deposits and concentrated in river gravels. Over millions of years, as water and ice broke down the gold-bearing rock, the heavy gold particles washed downstream, settling in cracks in the bedrock, behind boulders, and in gravel bars where the current slowed. Because gold is dense, much denser than the surrounding sand and rock, it concentrates naturally, creating deposits that can be remarkably rich and remarkably localized, a fortune in one spot and nothing just a few feet away. The gold rush of 1849 and the decades that followed exploited both types of deposits. Early miners panned the placer gravels, extracting the easy gold from streams and rivers. Later, they followed the gold upstream to its source, tunneling into hillsides and mountains to reach the quartz veins, creating thousands of miles of underground workings that honeycomb the western slope of the Sierra. But the geology also created something else: natural cave systems and voids within the mountains, spaces that existed long before humans arrived and that sometimes intersect, confuse, or conceal the human-made tunnels. The Sierra Nevada is not primarily a karst landscape. It lacks the limestone caves common in other regions. But the granite and metamorphic rocks contain fractures, ancient fault zones, and areas where different rock types meet and erode at different rates. Water flowing through these fractures over millions of years has carved passages, some small and constricted, others large enough to walk through, descending into the mountains in ways that are poorly mapped and incompletely understood. Additionally, volcanic activity on the range's eastern and northern margins created lava tubes, tunnels formed when the surface of a lava flow cooled and solidified, while molten rock continued to flow beneath, eventually draining away and leaving hollow tubes. Some of these tubes are well known and accessible. Others, particularly those buried by subsequent eruptions or glaciation, may exist undiscovered beneath the surface. This combination of human-made mine tunnels, natural fracture systems, and volcanic tubes creates an underground landscape that is complex, interconnected in unpredictable ways, and dangerous. Shafts dug by miners sometimes break into natural voids, opening access to systems that extend far beyond the original excavation. Natural caves sometimes contain evidence of human entry, but whether that entry was recent or ancient, intentional or accidental, is often impossible to determine. The Sierra Nevada, in geological terms, is a treasure vault built by tectonic forces, filled by hydrothermal chemistry, cracked open by uplift and erosion, and sculpted by ice and water into a three-dimensional maze that extends from the surface to depths that remain unknown. Understanding this geology is essential to understanding the stories that follow, because the geology makes possible what the stories describe. Gold rich enough to drive obsession, tunnels that confuse and conceal, and spaces beneath the surface where the rules of the surface world seem not to apply. Long before gold drew outsiders to the Sierra Nevada, the mountains were home. The indigenous peoples of the region, including the Miwok, Maidu, Yokuts, Paiute, Washoe, and others, lived in these mountains and the surrounding foothills for thousands of years, developing intricate knowledge of the landscape, its resources, and its dangers. The relationship between these peoples and the mountains was not one of exploitation, but of reciprocity and respect. The Sierra provided food, oak acorns gathered and processed into meal, deer and other game, seeds, roots, and berries. It provided materials, stone for tools, wood for structures and baskets, fibers for cordage and clothing. And it provided water, the snowmelt streams and rivers that sustained life in a landscape that could be harsh and unforgiving. But the Sierra also contained places that were understood to be dangerous, powerful, and in some cases forbidden. Oral traditions passed down through generations include accounts of locations where people should not go, peaks and canyons associated with powerful spirits, and specific sites beneath the surface that were understood to be thresholds to other worlds or dwelling places of beings who were not human. These traditions are difficult to access and interpret today. The genocide and cultural destruction inflicted on California's indigenous peoples during and after the gold rush obliterated much knowledge. Languages were lost, oral traditions interrupted, and spiritual practices suppressed. What remains are fragments, recorded in varying degrees of completeness and accuracy by anthropologists, often generations after the original knowledge holders had died. But certain themes appear consistently. Many Sierra Nevada indigenous groups spoke of the mountains as living entities, possessing awareness and agency. Certain caves and openings in the rock were understood to be entrances to a subterranean world, a place associated with creation stories, with the dead, or with spirits who controlled weather, earthquakes, and other natural forces. Some traditions describe tunnels or passages beneath the mountains that connected distant locations, allowing travel underground. Whether these accounts referred to actual physical passages, to metaphorical or spiritual journeys, or to both simultaneously, is unclear and may not be a meaningful distinction within the indigenous cosmologies from which the stories emerged. There are also accounts, fragmentary and often third-hand, of indigenous peoples knowing about and occasionally using caves for specific purposes: vision quests, burial sites, storage of sacred objects, or refuge during conflict. The interior of the earth was understood to be powerful, a place where ordinary rules did not hold and where contact with the numinous was possible but dangerous. Critically, some traditions include prohibitions against taking certain materials from beneath the ground. While these prohibitions are sometimes interpreted retrospectively as referring to gold, the original context may have been broader, relating to disturbance of the earth itself rather than specific minerals. The arrival of European and American miners who tore into the mountains on an unprecedented scale would have been understood not merely as theft of resources, but as violation of sacred boundaries, an act of cosmic significance with inevitable consequences. When the gold rush brought hundreds of thousands of outsiders into the Sierra, the indigenous peoples whose homelands were invaded faced catastrophic violence. Miners killed indigenous people to take their land, to eliminate perceived threats, or simply out of racial hatred. Diseases introduced by the newcomers swept through communities with no immunity. Starvation followed as traditional food sources were destroyed or denied. In less than 2 decades, the indigenous population of the Sierra Nevada and surrounding regions declined by an estimated 90% or more. But knowledge survived, passed quietly within families and communities, surfacing occasionally in conversations with researchers or in contexts where it seemed safe to share. And some of that knowledge concerns the tunnels and caves, the places beneath the surface that were known, that had names and stories, and that were understood to be significant in ways that the gold-obsessed miners could not comprehend. In the 20th century, as anthropologists worked to document what remained of indigenous cultures, they recorded scattered references to underground places. A Miwok elder in the 1920s described a cave in the high country where ancestors went to speak with spirits, a place now lost because the landmarks that identified it had changed, or because the knowledge of its exact location had died with earlier generations. A Maidu account from the 1930s mentioned tunnels in the northern Sierra associated with creation stories, passages through which the first people emerged into the world. These accounts are tantalizing but frustratingly incomplete. They suggest a layer of meaning and history associated with the Sierra's underground spaces that predates and exists independently of the mining era. a layer that has been largely erased, but that occasionally surfaces in ways that complicate the later stories of lost mines and mysterious tunnels. There is also the question of whether indigenous peoples worked gold or other metals before European contact. The prevailing archaeological consensus is that California's indigenous peoples did not practice metallurgy, that they had no tradition of mining or smelting, and that their material culture was based on stone, wood, bone, and fiber. But this consensus has been challenged by occasional finds, objects that seem to show evidence of metalworking references in early Spanish accounts to indigenous peoples possessing or trading gold. And the practical observation that anyone living intimately with a landscape for thousands of years would inevitably notice and potentially use visible gold even if they did not develop industrial-scale mining. If indigenous peoples did know about gold sources, they had reasons, both practical and spiritual, to keep that knowledge hidden from the Spanish and later the Americans. Gold drew violence, disruption, and destruction. Revealing its location would invite catastrophe, as indeed it did when the gold rush began. The indigenous history of the Sierra Nevada's underground spaces is thus a history of loss, fragmentation, and silence, but also of persistence. The knowledge that survives suggests that the mountains beneath the mountains were known, named, and significant long before the miners arrived, and that the stories told by indigenous peoples about those places, if we could fully recover and understand them, might reframe the later legends of lost mines and forbidden tunnels in profound ways. The Spanish presence in California began in 1769 with the establishment of missions and presidios along the coast, but penetration into the Sierra Nevada interior came later and remained limited throughout the Spanish and Mexican periods. The mountains were a barrier difficult to cross, and the indigenous peoples of the interior resisted Spanish incursion more successfully than coastal groups. Nevertheless, Spanish explorers, missionaries, and soldiers did enter the foothills and sometimes the higher elevations, and their accounts, sparse and often frustratingly vague, provide the first European documentation of the Sierra and hint at early awareness of its mineral wealth. The Spanish were looking for gold and silver. The success of mining operations in Mexico and South America had made mineral extraction central to the colonial economy, and California was explored in part to assess its potential for precious metal deposits. But the Spanish, despite their interest and despite several expeditions specifically tasked with prospecting, never initiated large-scale mining in the Sierra Nevada. The reasons for this failure are debated, but they likely include the remoteness of the region, the difficulty of the terrain, the resistance of indigenous peoples, and perhaps simple bad luck in not stumbling upon the richest deposits. Yet there are intriguing hints in the Spanish records. A 1776 account by an expedition exploring the Central Valley mentions indigenous people possessing small gold ornaments and indicates that when questioned about the source, they gestured toward the mountains to the east. Whether this account is accurate, whether the objects were actually gold, and whether the indigenous people were describing actual sources or deliberately misdirecting the Spanish cannot be determined. A report from the early 1800s, during the Mexican period, describes a small-scale mining operation in the foothills, worked by Mexican prospectors who had identified a quartz vein containing visible gold. The report indicates the operation was abandoned due to Apache raids, a term the Spanish and Mexicans sometimes use generically for hostile indigenous groups, and the location was lost to record. This account, if genuine, would predate the gold rush by several decades, and suggests that at least some individuals were aware of gold in the Sierra before 1848. There are also persistent stories, impossible to verify, of Spanish or Mexican miners working secret claims in the Sierra, extracting gold quietly to avoid taxation, claim disputes, or attracting attention from other prospectors. Some of these stories involve tunnels, described as being more extensive or better constructed than would be expected from small-scale operations, and located in areas that would later be far from gold rush activity. The documentary record from the Spanish and Mexican periods is maddeningly incomplete. Many records were lost, destroyed during political upheavals, or simply never created for activities that were meant to remain secret. What survives is fragmentary, often second-hand, and filtered through the biases and limited understanding of the writers. But the cumulative picture suggests that by the time the United States acquired California in 1848, there was already a body of knowledge, rumor, and speculation about gold in the Sierra Nevada. Some of this knowledge was accurate, some was exaggerated, and some was deliberate misinformation, but it existed, circulating among Mexican settlers, indigenous peoples, and the small number of American and European trappers and traders who had entered the region. When James Marshall found gold at Sutter's Mill in January 1848, triggering the gold rush, he was not discovering gold in California for the first time. He was revealing it to the world in a way that could not be suppressed or controlled, opening a floodgate that would transform the Sierra Nevada and California forever. The discovery at Sutter's Mill on the American River in the western foothills of the Sierra Nevada was confirmed and publicized by the spring of 1848. By summer, men from across California were abandoning their jobs and heading to the Sierra to search for gold. By 1849, the news had spread across the United States and around the world, and the Great Migration began. Tens of thousands in 1849, hundreds of thousands in subsequent years, people from every inhabited continent flooded into California. They came by ship around Cape Horn, by ship to Panama, and then overland across the isthmus, and by ship again up the coast, by wagon train across the plains and the deserts and the mountains, on foot, on horseback, by any means available. They came seeking wealth, seeking transformation, seeking escape from the lives they had known. What they found was a landscape unprepared for such an invasion. There was no infrastructure, no law, no established order. Towns sprang up overnight, makeshift collections of tents and rough cabins, and disappeared just as quickly when the nearby diggings played out. Violence was endemic, claim disputes settled by force, indigenous people murdered for their land or simply for being in the way, and the rule of law, such as it existed, administered by miners' courts and vigilante justice. The environmental impact was immediate and catastrophic. Rivers were diverted, hillsides washed away by hydraulic mining, forests cut down for timber and fuel, and wildlife slaughtered for food. The indigenous peoples, already devastated by disease, faced systematic extermination, killed by miners, by state-sponsored militias, and by policies of removal and confinement. But amidst the chaos and destruction, gold was found, vast quantities of it. The early placer deposits, the easy gold in the river gravels, yielded fortunes to those who arrived first and worked the richest spots. Stories spread of men making thousands of dollars in a single day, of gold so plentiful it could be scooped up by the handful. These stories drew more people, and as the easy gold was exhausted, miners were forced to dig deeper, to work harder, to develop new techniques. Rockers and sluices replaced simple gold pans. Shafts were sunk to reach buried river channels, ancient streambeds now high and dry that contained concentrated placer deposits. Tunnels followed quartz veins into hillsides and mountains, the beginning of hard rock mining that would dominate the later decades of the gold rush. And with the tunneling came discoveries, not just of gold, but of the underground world itself. Miners broke into natural caves, found water-carved passages extending into darkness, encountered geological formations they could not explain. Some of these discoveries were recorded in mining journals, newspapers, or personal letters. Others were kept secret because the finder wanted to explore further without competition, because the discovery seemed too strange to risk ridicule, or because something about the place felt wrong in ways that discouraged sharing. The gold rush era, roughly 1848 to the 1860s, established the pattern that would repeat throughout the Sierra Nevada's mining history. Brief, intense exploitation of accessible deposits, followed by the realization that much of the gold was deeper, harder to reach, and required capital equipment and knowledge beyond what individual prospectors possessed. The lone miner with a pan and a dream gave way to organized companies with hydraulic monitors, stamp mills, and deep shaft mines. But the lone prospector never entirely disappeared. There were always men, and occasionally women, who believed that the companies had missed something, that there were deposits overlooked or undiscovered, that with the right combination of skill, knowledge, and luck, an individual could still strike it rich. These prospectors ranged far from the established mining districts, exploring remote canyons and high country, digging prospect holes, following promising outcrops, and sometimes finding things that did not fit the standard narrative. It is from this later generation of prospectors, the ones working in the 1860s, 1870s, and beyond, after the initial rush had subsided, but while the dream remained alive, that many of the stories of lost mines and mysterious tunnels originate. These were men who spent years, sometimes entire lifetimes, in the mountains, who knew the landscape intimately, and whose accounts, when they surfaced, often contained details that demanded attention even when they could not be verified. The Sierra Nevada, by the end of the 1850s, had been transformed from a largely unknown wilderness into one of the most intensively exploited landscapes on Earth. But the exploitation was uneven, concentrated in areas where gold had been found and ignoring vast stretches of the range. The tunnels dug by miners represented only a fraction of the possible underground spaces, and the knowledge they gained of what lay beneath the surface was fragmentary and often misunderstood. The stage was set for the legends that would follow, legends of mines that were found and lost, of tunnels that led to places miners could not explain, and of wealth that remained hidden despite, or perhaps because of, the frenzied searching that had turned the mountains inside out. To understand the stories of lost mines and mysterious tunnels, it is necessary to understand what gold rush-era mining actually looked like, how tunnels were dug, what records were kept, and what was and was not possible for individual prospectors or small groups working with 19th-century technology. Early placer mining required minimal equipment: a pan, a rocker, or a sluice box, tools that allowed miners to separate gold from gravel using water and gravity. This type of mining left little permanent trace beyond disturbed gravel bars and diverted streams. But as the surface placers were exhausted, miners turned to techniques that left lasting scars. Hydraulic mining, developed in the 1850s and used extensively through the 1880s until outlawed due to environmental destruction, involved directing powerful jets of water against hillsides, washing away entire slopes to expose gold-bearing gravels. The sediment and debris washed downstream, choking rivers, burying farmland, and causing floods. The landscape was reshaped on a massive scale, with some hillsides simply erased. Hard rock mining, the pursuit of lode gold in quartz veins, required tunneling into solid rock. Miners would locate a vein exposed on the surface, then follow it underground, digging horizontally into hillsides or vertically down from the surface. The work was brutal and dangerous, done by hand with picks, hammers, and chisels, or later with black powder explosives. A typical hard rock mine consisted of an entrance tunnel or adit, driven horizontally into a hillside, or a vertical shaft sunk from the surface, with levels extending horizontally at various depths. Miners followed the vein, digging where the gold was and leaving behind a maze of passages, dead ends, side tunnels, and collapsed sections. Shoring with timber was minimal or poorly done, and collapses were common. Ventilation was often inadequate, and miners worked by candlelight or later by carbide lamp in cramped, dark, and suffocating conditions. Record-keeping varied wildly. Large, corporate-owned mines kept detailed maps, production records, and engineering surveys. But individual prospectors and small partnerships often kept no records at all, or maintained them only in personal notebooks and sketches that might be lost, destroyed, or hidden. Claim records filed with local mining districts provided some documentation, but the maps were often crude, the descriptions vague, and the actual extent of underground workings unrecorded. This means that there are thousands of tunnels, shafts, and excavations in the Sierra Nevada whose locations are known only approximately, whose extent is unknown, and whose current condition, whether open, collapsed, or partially flooded, is undocumented. Some of these workings connect to each other in ways that were unintentional, miners from different claims breaking through into each other's tunnels. Others intersect natural caves or fracture systems, opening access to spaces that extend far beyond the original excavation. When a prospector or small group made a discovery they wanted to keep secret, either to avoid claim jumpers or to work the deposit privately before revealing it, they would conceal the entrance, tell no one, or provide false information about the location. If the discoverer then died, disappeared, or was unable to return, the knowledge of the location died with them, creating the pattern of the lost mine. Additionally, the landscape itself changed. Erosion, landslides, vegetation growth, and in some cases deliberate concealment by indigenous peoples or rival miners could render a previously known location unrecognizable. A tunnel entrance visible in 1855 might be buried by 1860 and impossible to find by 1900. The gold rush also created a culture of secrecy, exaggeration, and misinformation. Successful miners downplayed their finds to avoid theft or unwanted partners. Unsuccessful miners exaggerated to maintain credibility or attract investors. Rumors of rich strikes were spread deliberately to draw people to a region where businesses, rather than mines, would generate profit. Sorting truth from fabrication in gold rush-era accounts is often impossible, even with access to multiple sources. All of this means that the underground landscape of the Sierra Nevada, the actual physical network of tunnels and passages, is far more extensive, complex, and poorly documented than most people realize. Modern efforts to catalog and map abandoned mines have identified thousands of openings, but this is certainly incomplete, and the deeper, more remote, and more dangerous sites remain largely unexplored. The Sierra Nevada is, in a very real sense, a honeycombed mountain range, penetrated by human excavation to an extent that is staggering and poorly understood, overlaid on a natural system of fractures and voids that was incompletely known even before mining began. The stories of lost mines and mysterious tunnels emerge from this reality, a reality where the underground is genuinely labyrinthine, where entrances can be lost and rediscovered, where natural and human-made passages intersect and confuse, and where the documentation is so incomplete that almost anything could be hidden in the gaps. Of all the lost mine legends that emerged from the Sierra Nevada, none has proven more persistent, more tantalizing, or more resistant to resolution than the lost cement mine, sometimes called the Lost Volcanic Mine or the Gold Lake Mine. A discovery that may have been made in the early 1850s and that has tormented searchers ever since. The basic story exists in multiple versions, but the core elements remain consistent across most tellings. Sometime in the early years of the gold rush, a group of prospectors, the number varies from 3 to a dozen depending on the account, were traveling through the high northern Sierra, possibly lost, possibly exploring, when they made an extraordinary discovery. They found, according to their later statements, a location where gold existed not in quartz veins, not in stream gravels, but embedded in a peculiar cement-like material, a conglomerate of volcanic origin that they described as being studded with gold nuggets and flakes visible to the naked eye. The gold was so abundant and so accessible that it could be pried out with a knife or simply picked up from the surface where weathering had exposed it. The prospectors, recognizing the extraordinary richness of the find, but lacking the means to extract and transport large quantities of ore, collected what they could carry, several pounds of gold-laden rock and loose nuggets, and attempted to mark the location so they could return with proper equipment and provisions. Then they left, descending from the high country as winter approached, carrying their samples and their secret. What happened next varies by account, but the pattern is grimly consistent. The prospectors reached settlements in the foothills or the Central Valley, displayed their samples, which were confirmed by assayers as genuine and extremely high-grade, and attempted to organize return expeditions. But when they tried to retrace their route, they could not find the location. The landmarks they remembered were either misremembered, had changed, or did not align in ways that made sense. Some accounts describe the group searching for weeks or months, becoming increasingly desperate and confused before admitting defeat. Others tell of return trips in subsequent years, with different guides and different strategies, all ending in failure. As the original prospectors aged and died, they passed on their stories, provided descriptions of the location, and in some cases drew maps or wrote detailed accounts. But none of these second-generation efforts succeeded either. The lost cement mine became a legend, a story told in mining camps and saloons, a dream that drew new searchers into the Northern Sierra year after year, decade after decade, continuing into the 20th and even the 21st century. The descriptions of the location are frustratingly vague, yet specific enough to seem credible. Most accounts place it in the high country of the Northern Sierra, somewhere in the region between the Yuba River drainage and the Feather River drainage, at elevations above 6,000 feet. The terrain is described as volcanic, with dark, rough rock distinct from the typical Sierra granite, consistent with the volcanic formations that do exist in parts of the northern range. The cement material itself is described as a conglomerate, a rock composed of rounded pebbles and cobbles cemented together by volcanic ash or lava that subsequently hardened. Geologically, this is plausible. Volcanic activity in the Sierra Nevada, particularly in the northern sections and along the eastern margin, did produce conglomerates and breccias, rocks where fragments of various materials are bound together. And it is well established that gold can be concentrated in such materials, especially in ancient stream channels that were later buried by volcanic flows and then re-exposed by erosion. In fact, some of the richest placer deposits found in the Sierra were exactly this type. Eocene-era river channels, tens of millions of years old, buried under layers of volcanic material, and then accessed by miners who tunneled through the volcanic cap to reach the gold-bearing gravels beneath. These deposits, when found, were spectacularly rich because they represented millions of years of gold concentration undisturbed by erosion. So the lost cement mine, as described, is geologically possible. A volcanic conglomerate containing concentrated gold exposed at the surface in a remote location is precisely the kind of deposit that could exist, that could be found by chance, and that could also be lost again if the finder could not accurately record the location, or if the exposure was small and easy to overlook. But possibility is not proof, and more than 150 years of searching have produced no verified discovery. Numerous individuals and groups have claimed to have found the lost cement mine or sites matching its description, but none of these claims have withstood scrutiny. In most cases, the supposed discoverers have been unable to produce samples matching the original descriptions, or the samples have been shown to come from known locations elsewhere, or the claims have simply been fraudulent, designed to attract investors or media attention. The search for the lost cement mine has claimed lives. In 1898, a prospector named William Banning disappeared in the northern Sierra while specifically searching for the cement mine. His remains were found the following spring, but the circumstances of his death were unclear, and he had left no notes or markers indicating whether he had found anything. In 1932, 2 men vanished during a search and were never found. In 1955, a geologist conducting a systematic survey of volcanic formations in the region fell to his death from a cliff. His maps and notes recovered, but showing no indication of a significant discovery. Modern researchers have attempted to approach the legend scientifically, analyzing the descriptions, cross-referencing geological maps, and searching areas where volcanic conglomerates are exposed. Some have found interesting outcrops, rocks that superficially match the descriptions, but assays have shown only trace gold, nothing approaching the richness described in the accounts. Others have focused on the historical record, attempting to identify the original prospectors and trace their movements. But the early gold rush period was chaotic, record-keeping was poor, and many of the names associated with the lost cement mine story cannot be verified in contemporary documents. The accounts that do exist were often written decades after the supposed discovery, based on memories that may have been distorted, confused, or deliberately altered. There is also the possibility, acknowledged by many researchers, that the lost cement mine never existed, that it was a story fabricated to attract attention or investment, or that it was based on a genuine but modest find that was exaggerated beyond recognition in the retelling. The pattern of lost mine legends follows predictable contours: an initial discovery or claim, samples that are real but whose origin is ambiguous, a story that grows more elaborate with each telling, and a search that becomes self-perpetuating as each failure motivates new attempts. Yet the lost cement mine persists in ways that simple fabrications usually do not. The geological plausibility, the consistency of core details across independent accounts, the documented deaths of searchers, and the occasional modern finds of promising but ultimately disappointing outcrops all suggest that something, whether the mine as described or something more modest, may have inspired the legend. The lost cement mine represents, in concentrated form, the essential mystery of the Sierra Nevada's underground wealth. Gold that is geologically certain to exist somewhere, a landscape vast and complex enough to hide almost anything a historical record too incomplete to resolve ambiguities, and a human tendency to believe hope and search long past the point where rationality would suggest abandonment. The lost cement mine is the most famous, but it is far from the only lost mine legend associated with the Sierra Nevada. The range is littered with stories of mines found and lost, wealth glimpsed and never recovered, and prospectors who claimed knowledge they could not or would not fully share. The lost Breyfogle mine, while primarily associated with Death Valley and the ranges east of the Sierra, has variants that place it in the eastern Sierra near the Mono Lake region. The story tells of a prospector named Charles Breyfogle who, in the 1860s, stumbled upon incredibly rich gold ore while lost and dying of thirst. He managed to reach safety with samples that assayed at extraordinary values, but he could never relocate the source. Breyfogle spent the rest of his life searching, dying impoverished and obsessed in 1888. Searchers have continued since, some claiming to have found Breyfogle's mine, none producing verification. The Lost Gunsight mine has similar confusion about its location, with some versions placing it in the Sierra rather than in the desert ranges. According to the legend, a group of 49ers crossing the mountains resorted to melting down a rich silver or to cast replacement parts for their damaged wagon, using the crude metal for a rifle sight, hence the name. They marked the location intending to return, but when they did, they found the landscape changed by a landslide or could not agree on which canyon they had been in. The Lost Sheepherder mine, with multiple variants scattered across the Sierra, typically involves a Basque or Mexican sheepherder who found gold while tending flocks in remote high country. The sheepherder showed samples to someone in town, described the location in broken English or through a translator, then either disappeared, died, or returned to his home country, leaving only fragmentary clues. Searchers following these clues find plenty of remote canyons and meadows where sheep were once grazed, but no gold. The Lost Blue Bucket mine originated with Oregon Trail emigrants, but has offshoots in the Sierra. The story tells of travelers who used ore-rich rocks to weight down their water buckets, not realizing the rocks contained gold until much later when a surviving stone was assayed. By then, the exact location along the trail where the rocks were picked up had been forgotten, and despite efforts to reconstruct the route, the source was never found. Closer to verified history are the partially lost mines, operations that definitely existed and produced gold, but whose exact locations have been obscured by time, vegetation, collapse, or deliberate concealment. Throughout the Sierra, there are records of small claims worked briefly in the 1850s or 1860s, noted in county records or mentioned in letters and diaries, that produced enough gold to be remarked upon, but that were then abandoned for unknown reasons and never successfully relocated. In some cases, these small mines were depleted, the easy gold extracted, and the remainder not worth the labor. In others, the miners may have been driven off by conflict, by harsh weather, or by the realization that richer opportunities existed elsewhere. In still others, there are hints of something stranger, mines abandoned because something about the place disturbed the workers, or because access became dangerous, or because of events that were not recorded or were recorded only obliquely. A particularly intriguing category involves mines that were reportedly worked by Chinese laborers, who comprised a significant portion of California's mining workforce by the 1860s, but who faced severe discrimination and legal restrictions. Chinese miners often worked claims that white miners had abandoned as played out, and they sometimes found overlooked gold through patient and meticulous work. But they also worked in cultural and linguistic isolation, keeping their own records in their own communities, and when those communities were dispersed or destroyed, as many were through violence and forced removal, the knowledge held within them was lost. There are accounts, difficult to verify but persistent, of Chinese miners working extremely remote claims in the High Sierra, possibly exploiting small pockets of very rich ore and sending the gold back to China through informal networks that bypassed official channels. If such operations existed, they would have left minimal trace and no English-language records, and the locations would have been closely guarded secrets lost when the miners died or returned to China. The pattern across all these lost mine stories is remarkably consistent: a genuine or claimed discovery. Samples that seem to verify richness a location described, but not precisely documented failed attempts to return or relocate, and a legend that persists across generations, drawing new searchers and occasionally producing new claim discoveries that themselves become contested or lost. Whether these legends represent real mines that remain unfound. Modest discoveries exaggerated into major strikes or complete fabrications designed to deceive or entertain, they have shaped how the Sierra Nevada is perceived and explored, creating a landscape where hidden wealth is always just beyond the next ridge, always tantalizingly possible, and always ultimately elusive. Beyond the lost mine legends are the mysterious tunnels, underground excavations that have been found, explored, and documented, but that do not fit comfortably into the known history of Sierra Nevada mining. These are not legends or stories, but physical places, accessible and verifiable, yet resistant to satisfactory explanation. The most extensively studied example is the network of tunnels discovered in 1957 in a remote area of the northern Sierra, in terrain that had no recorded mining claims and was far from any known gold rush activity. The tunnels were found by a survey crew working for the U.S. Forest Service, who noticed an opening obscured by brush and investigated. What they found was a system of at least 5 interconnected passages, extending more than 300 feet into a mountainside, with evidence of skilled engineering, including timber shoring, ventilation shafts, and worked stone that showed marks of metal tools. The tunnels did not follow any obvious mineral vein, and assays of the surrounding rock showed no significant gold or other valuable metals. The purpose of the excavation was unclear. Initial theories suggested the tunnels were old prospect holes, exploratory excavations that had found nothing and been abandoned. But the scale and quality of the work seemed inconsistent with speculative prospecting. The tunnels represented hundreds or thousands of hours of labor, a significant investment that made no sense unless the excavators had strong reason to believe they would find something valuable. Further investigation revealed features that deepened the mystery. Some of the timber shoring, when analyzed, came from tree species that had not been common in the area during the gold rush period, but that matched older, pre-contact forest composition. This suggested the tunnels might be significantly older than the 1850s, though how much older could not be determined without direct dating of the wood, which was too degraded for reliable radiocarbon analysis. More troubling were the tool marks on the stone, which did not match typical 19th century mining techniques. A geologist who examined the tunnels in 1960 noted that the excavation pattern seemed to follow a natural fracture system rather than a mineral vein, as if the diggers were enlarging and connecting existing passages rather than cutting entirely new tunnels. This approach would make sense for creating access to a natural cave system, but not for mining. The tunnels were partially explored and mapped in the 1960s and 1970s, but a collapse in 1982 sealed the main entrance, and subsequent efforts to reopen access have been blocked by safety concerns and regulatory restrictions. What remains is a documented but inaccessible site, a physical mystery literally buried and unresolved. Other tunnels of unclear purpose have been found elsewhere in the Sierra. In 1974, hikers in the Desolation Wilderness, a protected area where mining was never permitted, found a tunnel entrance concealed behind a rockfall. The tunnel extended approximately 50 feet before ending in a smooth stone wall that showed clear evidence of tool work. The wall was not collapsed rubble, but an intentional terminus, as if the excavators had reached their intended depth and stopped. No mine waste, no tools, and no artifacts were found in the tunnel, and the stone showed no mineralization. In 1988, a cave exploration group investigating a natural limestone cave in the northern Sierra found evidence of human modification. A section of passage that had been artificially widened, with tool marks visible on the walls, and a side chamber that appeared to have been deliberately excavated. The modifications were old, with significant mineral deposition over the tool marks, suggesting the work had been done decades or possibly much longer before. But the cave was in an extremely remote location, requiring technical climbing to access, and there was no obvious reason for anyone to have gone to such effort unless they knew the cave led to something valuable, which subsequent exploration did not confirm. There are also reports, less well documented but persistent, of tunnels found by hunters, hikers, or Forest Service personnel in backcountry areas. Tunnels that, when reported, were investigated and found to be unremarkable or that could not be relocated on follow-up visits. The transient nature of these accounts makes verification difficult, but the pattern is consistent enough to suggest that unexplained underground excavations are more common than the few well-documented cases would indicate. Several explanations have been proposed for these mysterious tunnels. One is that they are indeed old mining explorations, but from periods or by groups whose records did not survive. This could include pre-gold rush Mexican or Spanish prospecting, Chinese miners working secretly, or even indigenous peoples, if they did practice limited mining for trade goods, a possibility that remains debated. Another explanation is that the tunnels served non-mining purposes, smuggling routes, hiding places for stolen gold or other contraband, or refuges constructed during periods of conflict or lawlessness. The 19th century Sierra Nevada was a violent place, and there would have been reasons for individuals or groups to create hidden spaces. A more speculative explanation suggests that some tunnels were attempts to access natural cave systems, dug by people who believed, correctly or not, that caves in the area contained something of value, whether mineral wealth, water sources, or something else. This theory is supported by the observation that several of the mysterious tunnels follow natural fractures or seem to connect to cave systems. The most unsettling possibility, and the one least discussed in official reports, is that some of these tunnels were excavated for purposes that remain genuinely unknown, by people whose identity and motivations are lost to history, and that the underground landscape of the Sierra contains layers of human activity that predate, run parallel to, or post-date the known mining era in ways we have not yet recognized. The mysterious tunnels represent a different kind of enigma than the lost mines. They are not legends but facts, not stories but stone. They exist, they can be entered and measured and photographed, and yet they resist explanation. They suggest that the underground history of the Sierra Nevada is more complex and less completely understood than the mining narrative allows, and that beneath the documented layer of gold rush excavation lies something older, stranger, and still largely hidden. As miners tunneled into the Sierra Nevada, they occasionally made discoveries that did not fit the expected pattern of gold, rock, and more gold. Some of these discoveries were reported and became part of the documented record, while others were mentioned only in passing in personal letters or diaries, or were kept secret for reasons that can only be guessed. One category of strange discoveries involves artifacts found deep underground, in contexts that seem to preclude their presence. In 1863, a mine shaft near Nevada City broke into a natural cavity approximately 150 feet below the surface. Inside the cavity, miners found human bones, stone tools, and what was described as a mortar and pestle, implements used by indigenous peoples for grinding seeds and acorns. The discovery was remarkable because the cavity was sealed, with no obvious entrance except the one created by the miners, and because the depth and geological context suggested the artifacts had been deposited long before the modern surface of the mountain existed. The find was reported to the State Geological Survey and examined by the state geologist, who confirmed the genuineness of the artifacts but could not explain how they came to be in that location. One theory proposed that the artifacts had fallen or been washed into a fissure in the rock that subsequently sealed through mineral deposition, but this did not fully account for the depth or the sealed nature of the cavity. The bones were too degraded for the dating techniques available at the time, and the artifacts themselves were eventually lost or misplaced, leaving only the written reports. Similar discoveries were reported sporadically throughout the gold rush period and beyond. In 1877, a tunnel near Columbia broke into a space containing what miners described as charcoal, bone fragments, and worked stone, all embedded in a layer of volcanic ash that had subsequently hardened. The excavators believed they had found evidence of a catastrophic volcanic eruption that had buried people or animals, but geologists could find no record of such an eruption in the timeframe that the artifacts suggested. In 1902, miners working a deep shaft near Jamestown found, at a depth of 200 feet, a layer containing rounded stones that appeared to have been deliberately shaped along with fragments of what might have been cordage or woven material too degraded to preserve, but visible enough to be noted in the miners' records. The geological layer in which these objects were found was dated, based on its position relative to known volcanic flows, to be millions of years old, an impossibility if the artifacts were indeed human-made. These discoveries gave rise to speculation, some scientific and some wildly speculative, about the antiquity of human presence in California and the possibility of civilizations or cultures that predated the known indigenous peoples. Most geologists and archaeologists dismissed the finds as misidentifications, contamination from more recent material that had worked its way down through cracks and fissures, or as hoaxes perpetrated by miners seeking attention or attempting to attract investment to their claims. But not all the strange discoveries involved artifacts. Miners also reported encountering underground features that defied easy explanation. Chambers far larger than anything the surrounding geology should allow, passages that seemed to have been smoothed by water flow, but that led to dead ends with no source or outlet for such water. And rock formations that resembled constructed walls or stairs, but that consisted of solid, unbroken stone. In 1889, a group of miners exploring an abandoned tunnel in the Yuba River region claimed to have found a chamber containing what they described as columns or pillars, vertical stone formations that were too regular and evenly spaced to be natural stalactites or other typical cave formations. They reported that the chamber extended beyond the range of their lamplight and that they heard sounds, echoes, or dripping water that suggested even larger spaces beyond. Frightened by the strangeness of the place and by a pervasive sense of unease, they retreated and sealed the tunnel entrance, refusing to return or to reveal the exact location. This account, published in a local newspaper, was dismissed as sensationalism or fabrication, but similar stories appeared periodically, suggesting either a persistent pattern of hoaxing or genuine encounters with unusual underground spaces. Modern speleologists acknowledge that the Sierra Nevada contains caves and voids that have not been fully explored or documented, and that the intersection of natural caves with mining tunnels could create exactly the kind of unexpected discoveries that the old reports describe. There are also the accounts of light phenomena observed underground. Multiple miners, working in separate locations and at different times, reported seeing faint glows or luminescence in deep tunnels, in areas where no external light source could penetrate and where the glow did not correspond to any known mineral fluorescence. Some attributed this to foxfire bioluminescent fungi, which do exist and can glow in dark, damp environments. Others suggested marsh gas or phosphorescence from decaying organic matter. But some of the reports describe light that moved, that appeared and disappeared, or that seem to respond to the presence of observers, behaviors that natural explanations struggle to account for. These strange discoveries, taken individually, are curiosities easily dismissed or explained away. Taken collectively, they suggest that the underground world of the Sierra Nevada contains layers of complexity, history, and mystery that the standard mining narrative does not capture. They raise questions about what lies in the unexplored or inaccessible sections of the thousands of miles of tunnels, about what remains buried beneath rockfalls and collapsed passages, and about whether the mountains hold secrets that are not merely lost, but actively hidden, protected by depth darkness and the limitations of human knowledge. The search for gold in the Sierra Nevada has always been dangerous. Cave-ins, explosions, falls, drowning in flooded shafts, and simple exhaustion and exposure killed thousands of miners during the gold rush and the decades that followed. But among these documented tragedies are cases that stand out, deaths and disappearances that seem connected not to the ordinary hazards of mining, but to something specific about certain locations or discoveries. In 1871, a prospector named Samuel Grant told friends in the town of Downeyville that he had found a tunnel, not one he had dug, but one he had discovered, old and partially collapsed, that led into a hillside where he believed a rich vein might be located. He entered the tunnel alone to explore, taking a lamp, rope, and basic tools. When he did not return by nightfall, a search party was organized. They found the tunnel entrance and followed it inward, but approximately 100 feet in, they encountered a collapse. They dug through the rubble and continued, finding more passages and more collapses, but no sign of Grant. After 2 days of searching, they gave up, concluding that Grant had been killed in a collapse and that his body was buried too deeply to recover. But some members of the search party reported hearing sounds, faint calls or tapping, coming from deeper in the tunnel system. Sounds that continued even after the areas where they seemed to originate had been excavated and found to be empty. In 1884, 2 Chinese miners working a remote claim in the high country near the Feather River failed to return to their camp. Their partners searched and found evidence that the men had been excavating a small cave or crevice in a rock face, enlarging it in what appeared to be an attempt to follow a mineral vein. The excavation site showed signs of a struggle or sudden flight, tools dropped, a basket of ore overturned, but no blood and no bodies. Tracks led away from the site but disappeared on hard rock, and despite extensive searching, the 2 men were never found. The remaining partners abandoned the claim, saying the place was unlucky, and refused to discuss details of what they had found at the excavation site. In 1903, a geologist named Dr. William Hargrove, conducting a survey of abandoned mines for the state of California, entered a tunnel complex near Grass Valley and did not emerge. Colleagues who went in after him found his equipment, his notebooks, and his lamp, all neatly arranged in a side chamber as if he had set them down intentionally. But there was no sign of struggle, no indication of collapse or other hazard, and no body. The tunnels were thoroughly searched, including shafts and passages that seemed to dead end, but Hargrove was never found. His final notebook entry, written hours before his disappearance, described finding an unusual passage, very old excavation, purpose unclear, descending, but provided no further detail. These cases and others like them share certain characteristics. The victims often disappeared while exploring old or unfamiliar tunnels rather than while working known mines. They vanished completely with no bodies recovered or were found dead under circumstances that were not fully explained by the obvious physical hazards. And in several cases, there were reports of strange experiences or observations immediately before the disappearance. Unusual sounds, unexpected passages, or a sense of disorientation or unease. Modern analysts, examining these historical accounts, typically conclude that the disappearances resulted from falls into unmapped shafts, entrapment in collapses, disorientation leading to wandering deeper into tunnel systems, until death from exposure or exhaustion or other tragic but explicable accidents. The underground environment is inherently disorienting. Darkness is absolute without a light source. Passages can look identical, and the psychological stress of being deep underground can impair judgment. But the families and colleagues of the disappeared often resisted these explanations, not from irrationality, but from knowledge of the individuals involved. Dr. Hargrove, for instance, was an experienced geologist and cave explorer, trained in safety procedures and not prone to recklessness. The fact that his equipment was arranged, not scattered or abandoned in panic, suggested deliberate action rather than accident. Similarly, the Chinese miners who disappeared were described by their partners as cautious and skilled, not the type to blunder into danger. The pattern of disappearances continued into the 20th century, though the context shifted from active mining to exploration and recreation. As the Sierra Nevada became a destination for hikers, spelunkers, and adventurers, people began entering old mines and tunnels out of curiosity rather than for profit. Many of these explorers were unprepared for the hazards, and deaths from falls, bad air, and getting lost became depressingly common. But among the ordinary accidents were cases that echoed the earlier mysteries. In 1947, 3 university students exploring abandoned mines near Auburn entered a tunnel that older maps suggested connected to a system of shafts and galleries. They carried flashlights, rope, and a plan to map the accessible portions. 2 of the students emerged after several hours, reporting that the third had separated from the group to explore a side passage and had not returned to the agreed meeting point. A search and rescue operation involving dozens of volunteers searched the tunnel system for 5 days. They found the student's flashlight, still burning, placed carefully on a rock ledge in a passage that dead-ended at a wall of solid stone. There was no sign of the student, no other passages leading away, and no explanation for how he could have vanished from a dead-end tunnel. The official conclusion was that the searchers had missed a connecting passage or shaft, that the student had fallen or become lost in an unexplored section, and that his body remained in the tunnels, too deep or too obscured to be found. But the students' companions insisted that they had thoroughly explored that passage, that it truly dead-ended, and that there was nowhere their friend could have gone. These deaths and disappearances, spanning more than a century, form a dark thread running through the story of the Sierra Nevadas underground spaces. They suggest that the tunnels and caves are not merely physically dangerous, but also capable of swallowing people in ways that leave no trace and no satisfactory explanation, that there are depths and complexities to the underground that remain unmapped and misunderstood, and that some of those who enter do not return. In recent decades, advances in technology and the rise of organized spelunking, cave exploration as a scientific and recreational pursuit, have brought new attention to the Sierra Nevadas underground world. Modern explorers equipped with helmets, headlamps, GPS devices, rope and climbing gear, and communication equipment have ventured into old mines and natural caves, mapping passages, documenting features, and occasionally making discoveries that add new dimensions to the old mysteries. The California Office of Mine Reclamation has conducted surveys identifying more than 47,000 abandoned mine openings in California, with the majority located in the Sierra Nevada and surrounding foothills. Of these, only a fraction have been thoroughly explored or documented. Many are too dangerous, unstable, flooded, or filled with toxic gases. Others are in remote locations where access is difficult and regulatory restrictions limit entry. Cave exploration groups, including the National Speleological Society and local grottos, have systematically explored and mapped natural caves in the Sierra, discovering systems that extend for miles and descend hundreds of feet. These explorations have revealed the complexity of the underground landscape, showing that caves and tunnels often interconnect in unexpected ways, that surface collapses can open access to previously sealed systems, and that new passages continue to be found. In 2003, explorers in the northern Sierra discovered a natural cave that had been partially intersected by a 19th-century mining tunnel. The miners had apparently broken through into the cave, explored a short distance, and then sealed the opening with a stone wall. The modern explorers removed the wall and found a cave system extending more than a mile, with chambers large enough to hold buildings and formations of spectacular beauty. Why the miners had sealed the cave rather than leaving it open or reporting its existence remains unknown, but the discovery demonstrated that such intersections between human and natural excavations exist, and that they may conceal spaces of significant extent. In 2011, a mapping project using LiDAR technology, which uses laser pulses to create three-dimensional models of terrain, revealed anomalies in a section of the central Sierra, regular depressions and subtle ground features that suggested subsurface voids or collapsed tunnels. Ground truthing expeditions found several previously unknown mine openings and one large sinkhole that appeared to be the collapsed roof of a natural cavern. Exploration of the cavern revealed a chamber approximately 200 feet in diameter, with passages leading away into darkness. The chamber contained no mining debris or artifacts, suggesting it had not been worked for ore, but the presence of charcoal fragments and what might have been fire-cracked rock raised questions about whether humans had used the space for other purposes. Modern explorers have also reported experiences that echo the strange phenomena described in historical accounts. In a 2015 exploration of a deep mine near Nevada City, a team equipped with sensitive sound recording equipment captured what they described as tones or hums, low-frequency sounds that seemed to emanate from deep within the mountain. Analysis could not identify a source, and the sounds did not correspond to water, wind, or geological settling. Similar recordings have been made in other locations, leading to speculation about acoustic phenomena in enclosed rock spaces, possibly generated by seismic activity, water movement, or other natural processes not yet understood. There have also been modern disappearances, though fewer and better documented than the historical cases. In 2007, an experienced caver exploring a system in the northern Sierra became separated from his group and was not found for 3 days, despite intensive searching. When he was finally located, in a passage that search teams had already checked twice, he was disoriented, dehydrated, and unable to clearly explain where he had been or how he had ended up in that location. He recovered physically, but reported persistent nightmares and a reluctance to discuss the details of his experience. Modern exploration has confirmed what the historical record suggested. The underground landscape of the Sierra Nevada is vast, complex, and incompletely known. The thousands of documented mine openings represent only a fraction of the total excavations. Many tunnels have collapsed or been deliberately sealed, and natural caves add an additional layer of complexity that is only beginning to be understood. Technology has made exploration safer and more systematic, but it has not eliminated mystery. If anything, the more thoroughly the Sierra's underground is explored, the more questions emerge, the more anomalies are found, and the clearer it becomes that this is a landscape that resists complete knowledge, that holds secrets in its depths, and that continues even in the age of GPS and LiDAR and instant communication to swallow those who venture too deep or too far from the known paths. Among the specific locations in the Sierra Nevada associated with mysterious tunnels, few have generated as much controversy and persistent investigation as the site known as the Burroughs Cave System, named after Russell Burroughs, who claimed to have discovered it in 1982. Though the location he described does not match any known Sierra Nevada geography, leading some researchers to propose that the name has been applied to multiple sites, or that deliberate misinformation surrounds the true location. What is documented, separate from Burroughs' contested claims, is a network of tunnels in the central Sierra Nevada, the exact location withheld by researchers and protected by current landowners, that was investigated by a team of geologists and archaeologists in 1991. This investigation, conducted under the auspices of a private research foundation and never fully published, produced a report that has circulated in limited form within academic circles, and that raises profound questions. According to the report, the tunnel system consists of at least 7 interconnected passages, extending more than 800 feet into a granitic hillside, with evidence of sophisticated engineering, including ventilation shafts, drainage channels, and what appeared to be intentionally carved niches or alcoves in the walls. The tunnels did not follow any obvious mineral vein, and assays of the surrounding rock showed no gold or other valuable metals in quantities that would justify such extensive excavation. The most remarkable findings concerned the tool marks and the artifacts. The tool marks on the tunnel walls showed characteristics that did not match 19th century mining techniques. A geological consultant noted that the marks appeared to have been made by implements harder than the typical iron or steel tools of the gold rush era, leaving cleaner, more precise grooves in the granite. Alternative explanations were proposed, including the possibility of diamond-tipped tools or specialized boring equipment, but the technology required would have been beyond what individual prospectors or small mining operations could access in the 19th century. The artifacts found within one of the alcoves were even more puzzling. They consisted of stone objects, carved or shaped in ways that did not match any known indigenous California culture, and fragments of what might have been ceramic or fired clay, unusual in a region where indigenous peoples primarily used basketry rather than pottery. Radiocarbon dating of organic residue found on one of the stone objects returned a date of approximately 1,300 years before present, centuries before European contact, and predating the known timeline of most indigenous cultures in the Sierra Nevada region. The investigation team was divided in its interpretation. Some members argued that the tunnels were simply 19th century mine workings, possibly exploratory, that happened to use unusual techniques or tools that left atypical marks, and that the artifacts were either modern intrusions, misidentified natural objects, or contaminated samples that produced erroneous radiocarbon dates. Others contended that the tunnels represented something genuinely anomalous, possibly pre-Columbian or even pre-indigenous, requiring a fundamental reconsideration of the timeline of human activity in the region. The controversy intensified when it was revealed that the landowner, after the investigation concluded, sealed the tunnel entrances with concrete and posted the property against trespassing, refusing further access to researchers. Attempts to obtain permits for additional investigation were denied, and the landowner declined to explain the decision beyond stating concerns about liability and environmental protection. This closure meant that follow-up studies, which might have resolved some of the questions through more extensive dating, metallurgical analysis of the tool marks, or systematic excavation of the alcoves, could not be conducted. The site became one more forbidden location, accessible only through the fragmentary reports and photographs from the 1991 investigation, and subject to endless speculation about what might lie deeper in the tunnels, what the sealed entrances might be protecting or concealing, and whether the closure was motivated by legitimate concerns or by a desire to suppress findings that challenged accepted narratives. The Burrows Cave system, or whatever the actual site should properly be called, exemplifies the pattern that repeats throughout the Sierra Nevada, tantalizing evidence that suggests anomaly, incomplete investigation that prevents resolution, and closure or inaccessibility that transforms the site from a scientific question into a forbidden mystery. In the northern Sierra Nevada, near the town of Sierraville, there exists a geological formation known locally as Devil's Gate, a narrow canyon carved through volcanic rock where the terrain shifts abruptly from rolling hills to steep, fractured cliffs. The area has a long history of indigenous use, was explored by trappers and prospectors in the mid-19th century, and has been the subject of persistent rumors about hidden tunnels and lost mines for more than 150 years. The documented facts are these. Devil's Gate contains several natural caves formed in volcanic tuff and breccia, rocks deposited by ancient eruptions and subsequently eroded by water. These caves were noted by early surveyors and appear on some 19th century maps, though the details are sparse. In addition to the natural caves, there are at least 3 tunnel openings that appear to be human-made, cut into the volcanic rock with straight walls and level floors that natural erosion does not produce. One of these tunnels was explored by a geology student in 1978 as part of a thesis project on abandoned mines. The student's report, filed with the university library, describes a tunnel approximately 200 feet long, terminating in a chamber roughly 20 feet square. The chamber contained no mining debris, no tool marks on the floor or ceiling, and no obvious purpose. The student noted that the tunnel's orientation did not align with any known mineral deposits in the area, and that the effort required to excavate it seemed disproportionate to any likely return, unless the excavators knew something about the geology that modern surveys had missed. More intriguing was the student's observation that the chamber contained markings on one wall, geometric shapes that appeared to have been incised into the stone with deliberate care. The student photographed the markings and consulted with an anthropology professor who could not identify them as matching any known indigenous tradition, but noted similarities to rock art found in other parts of the Great Basin, geometric patterns associated with shamanic practices or astronomical observations. The tunnel and chamber were revisited in 1995 by a team documenting abandoned mines for safety purposes. Their report confirmed the earlier description, but added a disturbing detail. The markings on the wall had been vandalized, partially chiseled away or obscured, and the chamber showed evidence of recent digging, as if someone had excavated the floor searching for something. Who had done this work, and what they might have been searching for, could not be determined. Devil's Gate is also associated with local stories, some dating back to the 19th century, of strange lights seen in the canyon at night, of sounds resembling chanting or drumming echoing from the cliffs, and of people who entered the area and emerged disoriented or frightened. These stories are typical of many remote and geologically dramatic locations, easily attributed to natural phenomena, misperception, or deliberate fabrication. But their persistence and their connection to a site with documented physical anomalies, the unexplained tunnels and the enigmatic markings, give them a weight they might not otherwise possess. Modern researchers have proposed several theories. One suggests that the tunnels were excavated by indigenous peoples, possibly as ceremonial spaces or refuges, and that the markings are remnants of spiritual practices. This theory challenges the conventional understanding that California indigenous peoples did not engage in tunneling or underground construction, but it is not impossible, and similar practices are documented in other cultures. Another theory proposes that the tunnels were dug by early trappers or prospectors, possibly Basque or Mexican miners predating the gold rush, who were searching for gold or silver based on surface indications that proved misleading. The lack of mining debris is explained by suggesting that the excavators removed all evidence of their work when they abandoned the site, though why they would do so remains unclear. A third theory, more speculative, suggests that the tunnels served a purpose unrelated to mining or ceremony, possibly as storage for contraband, as hiding places for individuals fleeing law enforcement or persecution, or as components of a larger system that extends beyond the currently known passages and whose full extent has not been discovered. What prevents resolution is access and funding. Devil's Gate is on a combination of public and private land, with access restricted by terrain, seasonal conditions, and regulations protecting both cultural resources and endangered species habitat. Systematic archaeological investigation would require permits, environmental reviews, and funding that has not been forthcoming, particularly for a site whose significance is contested and whose potential findings might raise more questions than they answer. Devil's Gate remains, like so many Sierra Nevada sites, a place where enough is known to establish mystery, but not enough to provide answers, where physical evidence and historical accounts gesture toward something anomalous, but leave the nature of that anomaly undefined, and where the forbidding landscape itself, steep, remote, and geologically complex, acts as guardian to secrets that may or may not exist. The story of the Sierra Nevada's tunnels and hidden spaces has been told primarily from the perspective of European and American explorers, miners, and researchers. Indigenous voices, the perspectives of the peoples who lived with these mountains for thousands of years before the gold rush, have been marginalized, dismissed, or entirely excluded from the narrative. Yet these voices, when they can be recovered and listened to with respect, offer dimensions of understanding that the dominant narrative lacks. The exclusion began with genocide. The indigenous peoples of the Sierra Nevada and surrounding regions suffered catastrophic population loss during and after the gold rush. Entire communities were destroyed, languages lost, knowledge holders killed or displaced. The oral traditions that might have contained information about underground spaces, their locations, their meanings, and their histories were interrupted and fragmented. What survived did so despite deliberate efforts to suppress indigenous cultures. Federal policies forced indigenous children into boarding schools where they were punished for speaking their languages or practicing their traditions. Spiritual practices, including those associated with specific landscapes and sacred sites, were criminalized. The result was generations of silence, of knowledge held secretly within families or communities, shared only in contexts of safety and trust. In recent decades, as indigenous communities have worked to recover and revitalize their cultures, some of that knowledge has begun to surface. though often with understandable reluctance to share it fully with outsiders whose track record of respect is poor. What has emerged includes accounts that challenge and complicate the treasure hunter narrative. Elders from Sierra Miwok communities interviewed by anthropologists in the 1990s and 2000s described oral traditions concerning caves in the high country that were understood to be dwelling places of powerful spirits. Not metaphorically, but as physical locations where the boundary between the ordinary world and the spirit world was thin or permeable. These caves were not to be entered except by trained spiritual practitioners, and then only with proper preparation, offerings, and intent. The traditions describe consequences for violation: illness, misfortune, psychological disturbance, or becoming lost in ways that were not merely physical but spiritual, a loss of direction and purpose that could extend far beyond the immediate experience. Some accounts suggest that those who entered these caves without permission might be taken, claimed by the spirits or the mountain, their physical bodies lost, and their spirits remaining in the underground world. These traditions, when viewed through a Western scientific lens, can be dismissed as supernatural belief. But they can also be understood as encoding practical knowledge about real dangers: poisonous gases that accumulate in caves and cause illness or death, disorienting geological features that cause people to become lost, psychological effects of isolation and darkness, and social consequences for violating community norms. Moreover, the traditions may preserve historical information about actual events, people who did enter certain caves and who did disappear or die, instances that became incorporated into spiritual teaching as warnings and explanations. The distinction between empirical observation and spiritual interpretation may be less clear than Western categories assume, and the traditions may represent a different way of encoding the same underlying reality that produces the stories of lost mines and mysterious tunnels. There are also accounts suggesting that some indigenous groups knew about gold deposits and deliberately kept them hidden. This knowledge was motivated not by a desire to hoard wealth. Gold had limited intrinsic value in traditional indigenous economies, but by awareness that revealing gold to outsiders would bring disaster, as indeed it did. Some traditions speak of places where yellow metal could be found, describe them in ways that suggest real locations, and then explain that those places were concealed, their entrances blocked or obscured, and the knowledge of their location entrusted only to specific individuals who were forbidden to share it. If such concealment occurred, it was a tragic irony that it ultimately failed to prevent the gold rush, which was triggered by a discovery at Sutter's Mill and rapidly spread throughout the Sierra, regardless of any indigenous efforts to protect the secret. But the tradition of concealment may explain some of the mysterious tunnels, passages that were sealed or disguised by indigenous peoples to prevent access to sites they wished to protect, whether for spiritual reasons, practical reasons, or both. Contemporary indigenous scholars and activists have pointed out that the entire narrative of lost mines and hidden tunnels is built on an assumption of extraction, the idea that whatever is in the mountains exists to be found, claimed, and removed. This assumption is colonial, rooted in a worldview that sees land as property and resources as commodities. Indigenous perspectives, by contrast, often emphasize relationship rather than ownership, reciprocity rather than extraction, and the understanding that some places and some things are not meant to be disturbed. From this perspective, the fact that certain mines remain lost, that certain tunnels resist discovery, and that those who search too aggressively sometimes meet with misfortune is not mysterious at all. It is the landscape asserting its own agency, the mountains protecting themselves, or more prosaically, the consequences of treating a complex and powerful natural system with disrespect and inadequate understanding. These indigenous perspectives do not fit comfortably into either the treasure hunter narrative or the conventional scientific narrative, but they offer a necessary corrective to both. They remind us that the Sierra Nevada was not an empty wilderness waiting to be discovered and exploited. That human relationships with the underground spaces extend back far longer than the 1850s, and that the stories we tell about hidden tunnels and lost wealth are always stories about power, about who has the right to know, to access, and to take. The exclusion of indigenous voices from the narrative of the Sierra Nevada's tunnels is not just a matter of historical accuracy. It is an ongoing ethical failure, and correcting it requires not merely adding indigenous accounts as footnotes, but fundamentally reconsidering the entire framework through which we understand these places, their histories, and their meanings. The scientific community, when it engages with the mysteries of Sierra Nevada tunnels, generally approaches from a position of skepticism, seeking natural and historical explanations for phenomena that might seem anomalous to untrained observers. This skepticism is methodologically sound. Most extraordinary claims do have ordinary explanations, but it sometimes leads to dismissing evidence that deserves more careful consideration. The mainstream geological explanation for unusual tunnels begins with the observation that the Sierra Nevada's complex geological history created numerous natural voids and fracture systems that can resemble human excavation. Water flowing through cracks in granite over millions of years can create surprisingly regular passages. Differential erosion, where softer rock erodes away leaving harder rock behind, can produce chambers and alcoves. Columnar jointing in volcanic rocks creates patterns that can look like deliberate carving. When miners encountered these natural features and modified them, either by enlarging passages to explore further or by connecting natural voids with short human-dug tunnels, the result can be a hybrid system that is difficult to interpret. A passage that looks too regular to be natural might be a natural fracture that miners widen slightly. A chamber that seems purposefully excavated might be a natural void that miners accessed and cleaned out. This explanation accounts for many of the mysterious tunnels, perhaps most of them. But it struggles with cases where the engineering is clearly sophisticated, where tool marks are unambiguous, and where the effort involved seems grossly disproportionate to any plausible natural starting point. It also does not explain the artifacts found in some of these spaces, objects that appear intentionally placed rather than naturally deposited. A second scientific approach focuses on historical archaeology and the mining record. Researchers point out that Gold Rush-era mining was chaotic, poorly documented, and involved people from dozens of different cultural backgrounds, each bringing their own techniques and approaches. Mexican miners had different methods than Chinese miners, who differed from Cornish miners, who differed from American prospectors. This diversity could explain unusual excavation patterns that do not match the expected norms. Moreover, the historical record is incomplete. Not all mining claims were recorded, not all excavations were reported, and not all techniques were documented. Secret mines, concealed to avoid taxes or claim jumpers, definitely existed. Mines worked by marginalized groups, particularly Chinese laborers and indigenous peoples forced into mining labor, often left no written record. A tunnel that seems to have no documented origin might simply be one of thousands whose paperwork was never filed or has been lost. This historical explanation is compelling for most cases, but it falters when confronted with evidence suggesting greater antiquity. Radiocarbon dates that predate European contact, if accurate, cannot be explained by gold rush activity. Tool marks that appear to have been made by extremely hard implements, if correctly interpreted, suggest technology not available to 19th century prospectors. And the geographic distribution of anomalous tunnels, with some located far from any known gold rush activity in terrain that is difficult to access even today, raises questions about when and by whom they could have been excavated. A third scientific approach examines indigenous capabilities, asking whether pre-contact peoples could have and would have created some of these underground spaces. The conventional answer has been no, that California indigenous peoples did not practice underground mining or extensive tunneling, and that their material culture did not include the metal tools necessary for excavating hard rock. But this conventional view is being challenged by new archaeological findings and by critical re-examination of old assumptions. Small-scale excavation, removal of ochre for pigments or soft stone for carvings, is documented among some California groups. The creation of subterranean chambers for ceremonial purposes, while not widely documented in California, is known from other indigenous cultures. And the absence of metal tools does not preclude tunneling. Harder stones can be used to work softer ones. Fire can be used to crack rock, and patient, sustained effort over years or generations can accomplish excavations that seem impossible if one assumes they must be completed quickly. If indigenous peoples did create some of these tunnels, the motivations would likely have been ceremonial, spiritual, or practical in ways that do not align with mining. Spaces for vision quests, burial chambers, storage of sacred objects, or refuges during conflict are all possibilities. Such spaces would likely be kept secret from outsiders, both to protect their sanctity and to maintain control over powerful or dangerous locations. The scientific theories, taken together, provide plausible explanations for most of the Sierra Nevada's mysterious tunnels. But they do not account for all the evidence, and the gaps between what science can comfortably explain and what the evidence seems to suggest remain, creating space for continued investigation and for more speculative theories. Where scientific explanations reach their limits, pseudoscientific theories rush in, offering dramatic and unfalsifiable claims that appeal to those frustrated by the caution and uncertainty of mainstream scholarship. These theories range from the marginally plausible to the utterly fantastical, but they are worth examining, not because they are likely to be true, but because their popularity reveals something about human needs and the cultural work that mysteries perform. The ancient advanced civilization theory, in various forms, proposes that the Sierra Nevada tunnels are remnants of a pre-indigenous culture that possessed technology equal to or exceeding that of modern society. This civilization, the theory goes, existed thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, flourished in what is now California, and then vanished due to catastrophe, war, or deliberate withdrawal, leaving behind only fragmentary traces, including underground excavations. Proponents point to the supposedly anomalous tool marks, the sophistication of some tunnel engineering, the radiocarbon dates that seem too old, and the artifacts that do not match known cultures. They argue that mainstream archaeology refuses to consider this evidence because it would require overturning established timelines and admitting that Native Americans were not the first or only peoples in North America, a position they characterize as politically motivated. The problems with this theory are numerous. First, the evidence is not as anomalous as claimed. Most of it can be explained through conventional means when examined carefully. Second, the theory requires an enormous absence of evidence. A civilization capable of excavating extensive tunnels would leave countless other traces, tools, structures, burials, art, none of which have been found. Third, the theory often relies on cherry-picking, emphasizing ambiguous data while ignoring the vast body of evidence that supports conventional archaeological timelines. More insidiously, ancient advanced civilization theories often carry racist undertones, explicitly or implicitly suggesting that indigenous peoples were too primitive to have created sophisticated works, and that some other, usually racially coded as white or European, people must have been responsible. This appropriation of indigenous lands and histories is deeply problematic and has been vigorously rejected by indigenous scholars. A related but distinct theory involves lost white races, claims that Europeans or other non-indigenous peoples reached North America long before Columbus and left remains, including tunnels and mines. These theories invoke Vikings, Celtic explorers, Phoenicians, or even more exotic candidates. While there is limited legitimate evidence for pre-Columbian contact by Norse explorers in northeastern North America, the extension of such claims to the Sierra Nevada lacks credible support. Another category of fringe theories involves geological catastrophism, the idea that the Earth has experienced recent cataclysmic events that reshaped landscapes and destroyed civilizations, and that the Sierra Nevada tunnels are either refuges created in anticipation of such events or remnants of civilizations destroyed by them. These theories draw on legitimate geological processes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, but exaggerate their frequency and impact to fit a narrative of cyclical destruction and renewal. More exotic still are theories involving non-human intelligence, extraterrestrial visitors, underground civilizations of beings unrelated to surface humanity, or interdimensional entities using the tunnels for purposes beyond human comprehension. These theories are unfalsifiable, relying on evidence that is entirely subjective or that cannot be independently verified, and they contribute nothing to genuine understanding. Yet the persistence of these theories, their ability to attract believers and generate entire subcultures of researchers and enthusiasts, points to something real: a widespread dissatisfaction with official narratives, a hunger for mystery and wonder in a world that seems increasingly mapped and explained, and a desire to believe that there are still frontiers, still unknowns, still possibilities for discovery that would fundamentally change our understanding of reality. The fringe theories, for all their flaws, perform a cultural function. They keep alive questions that mainstream science might prematurely close. They encourage amateur investigation and exploration, and they remind us that the boundary between knowledge and mystery is not as solid as institutions might claim. The challenge is to maintain the questioning spirit, the openness to anomaly, while rejecting the intellectual shortcuts and biases that undermine genuine inquiry. Setting aside the more extreme theories, there remains a legitimate scientific question about whether some Sierra Nevada tunnels might represent human activity that predates the accepted timeline of human presence in the region. The conventional archaeological model places the earliest human arrival in California at approximately 13,000 to 15,000 years ago, following the end of the last ice age. Evidence for human presence before that time is limited and contested. But there are anomalies in the Sierra Nevada that, if correctly interpreted, would push human activity in the region significantly earlier. These anomalies deserve serious consideration, even if the ultimate conclusion is that they do not overturn the conventional timeline. The first category of anomalous evidence involves artifacts found in geological contexts that suggest great age. The discoveries made by gold rush miners, human bones and tools found in sealed cavities deep underground, in layers that seem to predate the current landscape, have never been satisfactorily explained or definitively debunked. The usual scientific response is to invoke contamination, arguing that more recent materials infiltrated older deposits through cracks and fissures, giving the false appearance of association. This explanation is plausible in many cases, but it is applied so uniformly, often without detailed examination of specific finds, that it risks becoming unfalsifiable, a way of dismissing inconvenient data rather than engaging with it. Some of the 19th century discoveries were examined by trained geologists who were aware of contamination issues and who nonetheless concluded that the artifacts were genuinely ancient. Modern re-examination of these claims is nearly impossible because the original artifacts were mostly lost or destroyed, and the sites where they were found have been buried by subsequent mining, erosion, or development. What remains are the written reports, and these are subject to endless interpretation and reinterpretation without new physical evidence to settle the matter. A second category involves dating anomalies. Radiocarbon dates from organic material found in tunnels, when they return ages of thousands of years, are typically explained as contamination, as samples that were not properly cleaned or that absorbed older carbon from surrounding materials. But some researchers argue that not all anomalous dates can be so easily dismissed, that the pattern of older-than-expected ages deserves more systematic investigation, and that at least some of the dates might be accurate. If even a handful of the radiocarbon dates from Sierra Nevada tunnels are correct, if organic material genuinely associated with human excavation does date to 2,000, 5,000, or 10,000 years ago, the implications would be profound. It would mean that people in the Sierra Nevada were engaging in underground excavation far earlier than currently believed, possibly for reasons entirely different from gold rush mining, and that this activity left traces that are rare and difficult to find, but nonetheless real. A third category of evidence involves the tool marks themselves. Metallurgical analysis of marks on tunnel walls, when it has been conducted, has produced conflicting results. Some analyses find marks consistent with 19th century iron tools. Others find characteristics, depth, regularity, hardness of the cut surface that suggest tools made of harder materials or applied with greater force than hand tools typically produce. The interpretation depends on assumptions about what technologies were available and when. If one assumes that only 19th century miners were excavating, then any marks must have been made with 19th century tools, and any anomalies must be explained by unusual techniques or conditions. But if one allows the possibility of earlier excavators with different technologies, whether indigenous peoples using techniques not preserved in the archaeological record or hypothetical pre-indigenous peoples whose existence is speculative, then the anomalous marks become potential evidence rather than puzzles to be explained away. The most careful statement that can be made is this: there is suggestive but not conclusive evidence that some human activity in Sierra Nevada underground spaces might predate the conventional timeline of the gold rush, and even the conventional timeline of human presence in California. This evidence is fragmentary, often poorly documented, and subject to multiple interpretations. It does not prove that ancient tunnels exist, but it does not definitively disprove them either. The honest scientific position is uncertainty calibrated to the evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the evidence for genuinely ancient Sierra Nevada tunnels does not yet reach that threshold. But the evidence is sufficient to warrant continued investigation, to justify keeping the question open rather than closed, and to resist the temptation to dismiss all anomalies as errors, contamination, or fraud. The question of antiquity matters not merely for academic reasons, but for how we understand the landscape and our relationship to it. If the mountains contain evidence of human presence extending back beyond the known timeline, it would reframe the entire history of the region. challenge our assumptions about technological and cultural development, and remind us that the past is not as settled or as fully known as we might wish to believe. A recurring theme in the lore of Sierra Nevada tunnels is the involvement of government agencies, federal and state entities that are variously described as protecting, concealing, restricting access to, or actively investigating certain sites. The reality of government involvement is complex, rooted in legitimate regulatory functions, but occasionally shading into opacity that fuels speculation and conspiracy theories. The U.S. Forest Service manages vast tracts of the Sierra Nevada as national forest land. Its responsibilities include public safety, environmental protection, and management of cultural and historical resources. In this capacity, the Forest Service has closed or restricted access to hundreds of abandoned mines and tunnels, sites deemed too dangerous for public entry due to unstable rock, bad air, or other hazards. These closures are generally well justified. Abandoned mines kill people with grim regularity through falls into unmarked shafts, asphyxiation from oxygen-depleted air or toxic gases, and collapses of rotten timbers and fractured rock. The Forest Service, facing liability for deaths on public land, has every reason to seal dangerous openings and post warnings, but the closure process is often opaque. Decisions about which sites to close, when, and by what method are made by agency personnel with limited public input. Maps showing closed sites are incomplete or withheld for security reasons, to prevent people from seeking out the closures and attempting to bypass them. And in some cases, sites of potential historical or archaeological significance are sealed before they can be adequately documented, either due to bureaucratic inefficiency or because the agency prioritizes safety and expediency over research. This opacity creates space for conspiracy theories. When a tunnel is sealed without public explanation, when researchers are denied access to sites they wish to study, or when agencies refuse to provide detailed information about locations and findings, the suspicion arises that something is being hidden deliberately, not for safety or environmental reasons, but to conceal evidence that challenges official narratives or that has military, economic, or political sensitivity. There are documented cases where government agencies have restricted information about archaeological sites to protect them from looting or vandalism, a legitimate concern, especially for indigenous cultural sites. But the line between protection and suppression can be thin, and agencies have not always been transparent about where that line is drawn or why specific decisions are made. In the 1990s, following the passage of the Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act, federal agencies, including the Forest Service, conducted surveys to identify and protect indigenous cultural sites on public lands. Some of these surveys identified caves and rock shelters with evidence of ceremonial use, burials, or other activities. The locations of these sites were classified as sensitive information, excluded from public records to prevent disturbance. This classification is understandable and arguably necessary, but it also means that there are dozens, possibly hundreds, of underground sites in the Sierra Nevada that are known to federal agencies, but about which the public has no information. The extent of these sites, what they contain, and whether any of them challenge conventional archaeological timelines is unknown outside of agency files and the communities whose ancestors created them. There are also persistent rumors of military involvement, claims that certain tunnels have been explored or used by the Department of Defense or intelligence agencies for purposes ranging from nuclear fallout shelters to covert research facilities. Most of these claims are unsubstantiated, but the Sierra Nevada did host Cold War-era military installations, including radar sites and communication facilities in remote high-altitude locations, and the possibility that some underground spaces were surveyed or utilized for defense purposes cannot be entirely dismissed. The most extreme conspiracy theories propose that the government has found evidence of ancient advanced civilizations, extraterrestrial artifacts, or other discoveries of profound significance, and has suppressed this information to maintain social stability or to monopolize technologies derived from the findings. These theories are not credible. They require levels of coordination and secrecy that governments rarely achieve and rely on evidence that does not withstand scrutiny, but they persist because they tap into widespread distrust of institutions and hunger for hidden knowledge. What is true separable from speculation is that government agencies do control access to many Sierra Nevada tunnel sites, that decisions about access are not always transparent, that legitimate research has sometimes been hindered by bureaucratic obstacles, and that the full extent of what agencies know about underground sites is not publicly available. This reality, frustrating to researchers and public alike, ensures that questions about what might be hidden in the mountains remain unresolved, and that the space for conspiracy theories remains open. After examining the geology, the history, the legends, the documented discoveries, and the competing theories, we arrive at the essential question: what can actually be known about the forbidden tunnels of the Sierra Nevada, and what must remain in the realm of speculation and mystery? The foundation of certainty is geological. The Sierra Nevada possesses the conditions necessary for significant gold deposits. Hydrothermal processes associated with the batholith's formation did concentrate gold in quartz veins and other formations. Erosion over millions of years did expose some of these deposits and concentrate placer gold in river gravels. The gold rush miners who found fortunes were not lucky dreamers, but people who understood, intuitively or explicitly, where geological processes would have deposited wealth. The gold was real, is real, and in places that have not been thoroughly explored, almost certainly remains to be found. We can also state with certainty that the Sierra Nevada contains thousands of miles of human-excavated tunnels, the product of the most intensive mining activity in 19th century North America. These tunnels are poorly mapped, inconsistently documented, and in many cases dangerous or inaccessible. The underground landscape created by the gold rush is genuinely labyrinthine, complex enough that entrances can be lost, passages can be forgotten, and discoveries made in one era can vanish from knowledge in the next. Natural cave systems, while less extensive than in limestone regions, do exist in the Sierra Nevada, formed by water erosion in fractured granite, by volcanic processes, and by other geological mechanisms. These natural voids sometimes intersect with human-made tunnels, creating hybrid systems that are difficult to interpret and that can extend far beyond the original excavations. We know that indigenous peoples lived in the Sierra Nevada for thousands of years and possessed detailed knowledge of the landscape, including underground features. We know that this knowledge was encoded in oral traditions, some of which described caves and underground places as spiritually significant, dangerous, or forbidden. We know that much of this knowledge was lost during the genocide and cultural destruction of the 19th and 20th centuries, and that what survives is fragmentary and often deliberately withheld from outsiders. We know that some miners and prospectors during and after the gold rush reported finding tunnels, chambers, and artifacts that they could not explain, and that some of these reports were documented by credible observers, including geologists and government surveyors. We know that the explanations offered for these discoveries, contamination, misidentification, hoaxes, are plausible in many cases, but may not account for all the evidence. We know that people have died and disappeared in Sierra Nevada tunnels under circumstances that, while often attributable to natural hazards, sometimes resist complete explanation. We know that the underground environment is inherently dangerous and disorienting, capable of killing through physical hazards and through psychological effects that impair judgment and perception. And we know that despite more than 150 years of intensive searching, some of the legendary lost mines, particularly the Lost Cement Mine, have never been conclusively found or definitively proven not to exist, and that the mystery of their location, and indeed their reality, remains unresolved. This is the bedrock of knowledge, the foundation upon which everything else rests. It is substantial but incomplete, leaving enormous gaps where speculation, theory, and mystery proliferate. The limits of knowledge in the Sierra Nevada case are not merely matters of insufficient data that could be resolved with more research. They are structural, built into the nature of the evidence and the passage of time. First, the historical record is irretrievably incomplete. Gold Rush-era California was chaotic, record-keeping was poor, and many activities, especially those involving marginalized groups or illegal enterprises, left no documentation. Miners who wanted to keep discoveries secret succeeded. Chinese laborers whose communities were destroyed left no English-language records. Indigenous peoples whose knowledge was oral and whose populations were decimated took their knowledge with them. No amount of archival research can recover what was never written down or what was destroyed. Second, the physical landscape has changed. More than 150 years of erosion, landslides, forest growth, and human modification have altered the surface appearance of the mountains. A landmark that guided a prospector in 1855 may be gone by 1900 and unrecognizable by 2000. Tunnel entrances have collapsed, been deliberately sealed, or been buried by vegetation. Even with precise historical descriptions, relocating a specific site can be impossible because the landscape no longer matches the description. Third, much of the underground remains inaccessible. Thousands of tunnel systems are too dangerous to enter without specialized equipment and training. Some have been deliberately sealed by government agencies. Others are on private land where access is denied. The most interesting sites, those with the greatest potential for revealing anomalies, are often the least accessible, either because their remoteness protected them from casual exploration or because their strangeness prompted closure. Fourth, some evidence is ambiguous in ways that cannot be resolved. Tool marks on stone can be interpreted differently by different experts. Radiocarbon dates can be contaminated. Artifacts can be misidentified or their context misunderstood. The same piece of evidence that one researcher sees as proof of anomaly, another sees as explicable through conventional means. Without additional context or corroborating evidence, which is often unavailable, these interpretive disputes cannot be settled. Fifth, the cultural and political dimensions of the question create barriers to knowledge. Indigenous communities may possess information about underground sites, but choose not to share it, either because the sites are sacred and not meant to be discussed with outsiders, or because past experience has shown that sharing such information leads to violation and desecration. This withholding is entirely justified, but it means that knowledge exists that researchers cannot access and that the full picture cannot be assembled. Finally, there is the problem of negative evidence. The absence of proof is not proof of absence. The fact that no one has found the lost cement mine does not prove it does not exist. It might simply be very well hidden or located in an area that has not been thoroughly searched. Conversely, the absence of evidence for ancient advanced civilizations is not proof they did not exist. It might mean that all traces have been eroded, buried, or removed. Negative evidence can support skepticism, but cannot provide certainty. These limits are frustrating for those seeking definitive answers, but they are also liberating. They preserve space for mystery, for continued exploration, and for the possibility that future discoveries will reveal what current knowledge cannot grasp. Given what can be known and acknowledging what cannot, what is the most balanced, evidence-based assessment of the Sierra Nevada tunnel mysteries? The most probable explanation for the majority of lost mine legends is that they are based on genuine but modest discoveries that were exaggerated through retelling, on hoaxes designed to attract investment or attention, or on misremembered experiences of prospectors working in disorienting and dangerous conditions. The psychological and social dynamics that create and sustain treasure legends are well understood, and the Sierra Nevada stories fit those patterns closely. But this explanation, while probably correct for most cases, does not account for all the evidence. There remain a number of cases. The lost cement mine being the most prominent, where the early accounts are specific and credible, where the geological plausibility is high, and where the failure to relocate the site can be explained by the vastness of the search area and the changes in the landscape rather than by the non-existence of the deposit. A balanced assessment would conclude that there probably are undiscovered gold deposits in the Sierra Nevada, possibly including some of significant richness, but that finding them is a matter of extraordinary luck combined with geological expertise, and that the vast majority of searchers will fail regardless of their dedication or resources. Regarding the mysterious tunnels that do not seem to have mining purposes, the most likely explanation for most is that they are indeed mining explorations that found nothing and were abandoned, possibly dug by groups whose records did not survive. The unusual features, the sophisticated engineering, the unexpected locations can be explained by the diversity of mining techniques, the incompleteness of the historical record, and the fact that prospectors sometimes dug in unlikely places based on theories or information that proved incorrect. But again, not all cases fit comfortably into this explanation. The tunnels at Devil's Gate, the system investigated in 1991, and other documented sites have features that are genuinely anomalous and that deserve more investigation than they have received. The possibility that some of these tunnels were excavated by indigenous peoples for non-mining purposes, or that they represent pre-gold rush activity by Spanish or Mexican miners, or even that a very small number might date to earlier periods, cannot be dismissed without more systematic study. The artifacts found in some tunnels and caves present the greatest challenge to conventional explanations. Objects that seem out of place, dates that seem too old, and contexts that seem sealed and undisturbed all require careful evaluation. Most will turn out to have mundane explanations, contamination, misidentification, or fraud. But the possibility that some represent genuine anomalies, evidence of human activity earlier than expected, or in forms not previously recognized, must be taken seriously. The deaths and disappearances, while tragic, are almost certainly the result of the natural hazards of underground exploration. Falls, bad air, getting lost, panic, and the cumulative effects of darkness, isolation, and stress. The Sierra Nevada underground is lethally dangerous, and the number of casualties, while notable, is not disproportionate to the level of activity and the risks involved. But the persistence of strange experiences reported by explorers, the disorientation, the sounds, the lights, the sense of presence or hostility, suggests that the underground environment has psychological effects that are real even if their mechanisms are not fully understood. These effects may be physiological, caused by oxygen deprivation, carbon dioxide buildup, or infrasound. They may be psychological, products of expectation, isolation, and the primal human fear of enclosed darkness. Or they may involve aspects of perception and consciousness that current science does not adequately model. The experiences are real to those who have them, and dismissing them as merely imaginary is inadequate. The question of government involvement is probably overblown by conspiracy theorists, but not entirely baseless. Agencies do control access to sites, do classify information about culturally sensitive locations, and do sometimes prioritize bureaucratic convenience over research access. This creates frustration and suspicion, but does not constitute evidence of cover-ups or suppression of revolutionary discoveries. The more mundane explanation that governments are often opaque and inefficient accounts for most of the perceived secrecy. Overall, the balanced assessment is one of complexity and nuance. The Sierra Nevada does contain genuine mysteries, sites, and phenomena that are not adequately explained by current knowledge. Most of these mysteries will eventually yield to prosaic explanations as more information becomes available. But some may not, and the possibility that the mountains hold secrets that challenge our understanding of the region's history, of indigenous capabilities, or of the geological and psychological realities of the underground remains open and worthy of serious investigation. The forbidden tunnels of the Sierra Nevada, whether they contain lost gold, ancient artifacts, or nothing more than rock and darkness, reveal profound truths about human nature and our relationship with mystery, landscape, and the unknown. At the most fundamental level, the legends and the searches they inspire demonstrate the power of hope and the dream of transformation. The belief that somewhere, hidden but findable, lies wealth or knowledge that will change everything, elevate status, solve problems, or simply prove that the world is stranger and more wonderful than it seems, is a belief that transcends culture and era. The Sierra Nevada, with its documented history of sudden fortunes and its vast, incompletely known underground, provides a perfect canvas for this belief. The fact that most searchers fail, that the mines remain lost, and the tunnels keep their secrets, does not diminish the power of the dream. In some ways, it enhances it. The possibility, however remote, is more sustaining than certain failure would be. As long as the mine might exist, as long as the next canyon might be the one, as long as the underground might still hold something extraordinary, the search has meaning. The mysteries also reveal our deep need for connection to place and to history. Walking a canyon that might have been walked by gold-fevered prospectors in 1850, standing at a tunnel entrance that might have been cut by hands long dead, touching stone that might bear the marks of tools from an unknown time, creates a tangible link to the past. The search for hidden tunnels is not merely about finding gold. It is about participating in a story larger than individual life, about feeling the presence of those who came before, and about engaging with landscape as something more than scenery. In indigenous traditions, this connection is explicit. The land is alive, it has memory and agency, and human interaction with it is relational rather than extractive. The Western tradition, particularly the frontier mythology that shaped Gold Rush California, tends to see land as resource, as property to be claimed and exploited. But the searchers who spend years in the Sierra, who develop intimate knowledge of specific canyons and peaks, who feel the pull of the mountains in ways they struggle to articulate, are accessing something closer to the indigenous understanding, even if they do not frame it in those terms. The mysteries also speak to the limits of technology and the persistence of the unknown. We live in an age of satellite imagery, GPS, ground-penetrating radar, and instant global communication. The surface of the Earth has been mapped to unprecedented detail. Yet the Sierra Nevada still hides things, still defeats the searchers, still preserves spaces where technology has not penetrated and where knowledge remains incomplete. This resistance to total mapping, to complete understanding, is psychologically important. It reminds us that the world is not fully conquered, that there are still frontiers, still possibilities for discovery in an age when discovery seems exhausted. The deaths and disappearances, tragic as they are, add a dimension of genuine risk that elevates the search from hobby to ordeal. The willingness to risk death for treasure or knowledge is simultaneously foolish and heroic, a demonstration of human capacity for both obsession and courage. The mountains do not discriminate. They test everyone equally, and those who fail to respect the danger pay the price. This harsh impartiality, this indifference to human hope and human life, is part of what makes the landscape powerful and the mysteries meaningful. Finally, the controversy between mainstream and fringe theories, between scientific skepticism and alternative narratives, reveals deep cultural tensions about authority, knowledge, and who gets to decide what is true. The resistance to mainstream explanations, even when those explanations are well supported, reflects widespread distrust of institutions and experts, a distrust that is sometimes justified by historical failures and sometimes weaponized by those promoting agendas. The Sierra Nevada mysteries become proxies for larger battles about whose knowledge counts, whose voices are heard, and what kinds of evidence and reasoning are considered legitimate. The truth, almost certainly, lies between the extremes. Mainstream science is generally correct in its broad outlines, but sometimes dismisses anomalies too quickly or fails to engage seriously with evidence that does not fit established paradigms. Fringe theorists are generally wrong in their dramatic claims, but sometimes identify genuine questions that deserve more attention. Indigenous knowledge holders possess information that is crucial, but that has been systematically excluded from dominant narratives. The challenge is to create space for multiple perspectives while maintaining standards of evidence and reasoning that prevent the conversation from collapsing into relativism, where all claims are equally valid regardless of their support. The forbidden tunnels of the Sierra Nevada are not just physical spaces. They are cultural texts, sites where all of these human needs, tensions, and questions play out in stone and story, darkness and dream. In the early 21st century, exploration of the Sierra Nevada's underground continues, but it has changed in character from the individualistic prospecting of the gold rush era, and even from the organized treasure hunting of the mid-20th century. Modern exploration is increasingly regulated. Federal and state agencies control access to most of the range, enforcing rules designed to protect safety, environment, and cultural resources. Permits are required for serious exploration, and they are not always granted. The days of simply wandering into the mountains, finding a tunnel, and digging where you please are largely over, replaced by bureaucratic processes that many find frustrating, but that serve legitimate purposes. Technology has advanced dramatically. Modern explorers use GPS to map their routes with precision, drones to scout terrain and locate possible openings, ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing tools to detect subsurface voids, and instant communication devices to call for help if needed. These tools make exploration safer and more systematic, allowing coverage of areas that would have been inaccessible or too dangerous in earlier eras. But technology has not eliminated mystery or danger. The underground environment still defeats GPS signals, still disorients even experienced explorers, and still contains hazards that no amount of equipment can fully mitigate. Every year, people are injured or killed in abandoned mines and caves, some in the Sierra Nevada, despite modern safety gear and rescue capabilities. Academic interest in Sierra Nevada tunnels has increased as well, driven partly by the need to document and manage the thousands of abandoned mines on public land, and partly by genuine scientific curiosity about the geology, history, and archaeology of underground spaces. Universities and research institutions have conducted surveys, studies, and excavations, adding to the body of documented knowledge, but also revealing how much remains unknown. Indigenous communities are also asserting greater control over sites of cultural significance. Efforts to repatriate artifacts, to protect sacred locations from disturbance, and to ensure that indigenous perspectives are included in decisions about access and research, are slowly changing the dynamics of who explores, under what terms, and for what purposes. This shift is long overdue and is beginning to correct some of the historical exclusions and violations, though much work remains. Commercial interests continue as well. Tourism related to gold rush history and lost mine legends generates revenue for Sierra Nevada communities. Books, documentaries, and guided tour keep the stories alive and attract new audiences. Some of this is responsible and educational, some perpetuates myths and encourages reckless behavior. The balance between preservation, access, and commercial use is contested and constantly renegotiated. At the research frontier, several projects are noteworthy. A multi-year survey using LiDAR to map abandoned mine openings and associated surface features has identified hundreds of previously unrecorded sites, many in remote areas. A collaborative project between archaeologists and indigenous knowledge holders is documenting oral traditions about caves and underground places, creating an archive that preserves information that might otherwise be lost, and that provides cultural context often missing from scientific accounts. Geological research continues to refine understanding of how gold deposits formed and where undiscovered deposits are most likely to exist. While this research is primarily aimed at modern mineral exploration, it also provides tools for evaluating lost mine legends, identifying areas where the geology supports the stories and ruling out areas where it does not. The overall picture is one of increasing knowledge, but also increasing awareness of how much is not known. The more systematically the Sierra Nevada underground is explored, the clearer it becomes that complete knowledge is impossible given the scale, complexity, and inaccessibility of the terrain. This realization is both humbling and liberating, acknowledging limits while preserving space for mystery and discovery. What lessons can be drawn from the long history of hidden tunnels, lost mines, strange discoveries, and persistent mysteries in the Sierra Nevada? What does this story teach us that extends beyond the specific details of California geology and gold rush history? First, the story teaches humility about the completeness of historical knowledge. The past is not a fixed, and fully knowable thing. It is fragmentary, contested, and constantly subject to reinterpretation as new evidence emerges and new perspectives are applied. The historical narratives we inherit, the stories told in textbooks and official accounts, are constructions, simplifications of vastly more complex realities. They are useful but always incomplete, and sometimes wrong. The Sierra Nevada tunnels, particularly those that do not fit the standard mining narrative, remind us that there are layers of history we have not yet uncovered, activities we have not yet recognized, and peoples whose stories have been excluded or erased. Being open to the possibility that the past was stranger and more complex than we currently understand is not a call to embrace pseudoscience. It is a recognition that knowledge evolves and that certainty is often premature. Second, the story teaches respect for indigenous knowledge and the importance of including indigenous voices in historical and scientific narratives. For too long, the story of the Sierra Nevada was told as if it began with European contact, as if the thousands of years of indigenous presence were merely prologue to the real history. This erasure was and is a violence, and correcting it requires more than adding footnotes. It requires fundamentally reconsidering whose knowledge is valued, whose perspectives shape the narrative, and who has authority over landscapes and the stories they hold. Indigenous peoples possess knowledge about the Sierra Nevada that is irreplaceable, knowledge encoded in languages, in oral traditions, in place names and stories that connect human and more than human worlds in ways that Western science often struggles to recognize. This knowledge is not primitive or superseded. It is different, often more sophisticated in its understanding of relationships and long-term patterns, and it is essential to any complete understanding of the mountains and their secrets. Third, the story teaches caution about the limits of technology and the persistence of mystery. We can map the surface from satellites, we can probe beneath the ground with sensors, we can model and predict and calculate, but we cannot eliminate the unknown. The Sierra Nevada, despite all our tools, still contains places we have not entered, features we have not recognized, and phenomena we do not understand. This is not a failure of technology. It is a reminder that the world is larger and more complex than our methods can fully grasp. Fourth, the story teaches that mystery has value. The unsolved questions, the lost mines that remain lost, the tunnels that keep their secrets, are not merely frustrating gaps in knowledge. They are invitations to wonder, to curiosity, to engagement with the world as something more than a resource to be catalogued and exploited. They preserve a sense of possibility, a belief that there is more to discover, that the story is not finished. In a world that often seems completely mapped and explained, where every question can supposedly be answered with a search engine query, the existence of genuine mysteries, questions that resist easy answers, is psychologically and culturally important. It keeps alive the sense of wonder that drives exploration, scientific inquiry, artistic creation, and spiritual searching. Fifth, the story teaches the necessity of balancing openness and skepticism. Being open to anomalies, to evidence that does not fit established narratives, is essential to progress in knowledge. Every major scientific breakthrough began with someone noticing that the data did not match the theory and taking that discrepancy seriously. But openness must be balanced with rigorous skepticism, with standards of evidence and reasoning that prevent us from accepting claims simply because they are exciting or because we want them to be true. The challenge is to maintain this balance, to be neither so skeptical that we dismiss all anomalies without investigation, nor so open that we accept claims without adequate evidence. The Sierra Nevada mysteries require this balance, demanding that we take seriously the reports of strange discoveries and unexplained phenomena, while also applying careful analysis to separate genuine anomalies from errors, hoaxes, and misinterpretations. Finally, the story teaches that landscapes are not passive. Mountains, valleys, caves, and tunnels are not merely scenery or resources. They are active participants in the stories that unfold within and upon them. They shape human experience, constrain human action, and in ways both physical and psychological exert agency. The Sierra Nevada has protected its secrets through its complexity, its danger, and perhaps through something less easily defined, a resistance that goes beyond geology and enters the realm of relationship. Indigenous traditions recognize this agency explicitly. Western science tends to explain it in terms of physical processes and human psychology. But the experience of those who spend time in the Sierra, who feel the pull of the mountains and the weight of their presence, suggests that the distinction between these perspectives may be less important than we think. Whether we call it geology or spirit, physics or relationship, the mountains are powerful and they do not yield their secrets easily. We began this investigation with a question: what lies beneath the Sierra Nevada, in the tunnels and caves and hidden spaces that honeycomb these mountains? We have examined the geology that makes gold deposits possible and that creates natural voids. We have traced the history from indigenous peoples through Spanish and Mexican periods to the gold rush and beyond. We have catalogued the lost mine legends, the mysterious tunnels, the strange discoveries, and the deaths and disappearances. We have evaluated scientific and pseudoscientific theories, government involvement, and modern exploration. And we arrive at an answer that is both satisfying and unsatisfying. The Sierra Nevada contains gold, some already found, some yet to be discovered. It contains thousands of miles of abandoned mine tunnels, poorly mapped and incompletely documented. It contains natural caves and voids of varying extent. It contains sites of indigenous cultural significance, some known to communities and agencies, some possibly still undiscovered. It contains mysteries, questions that current evidence does not resolve, and possibilities that remain open to investigation. But it does not yield these secrets willingly. The mountains are vast, the underground is dangerous, and the passage of time has obscured as much as it has revealed. Those who search for the lost cement mine or other legendary deposits will almost certainly fail, not because the deposits definitively do not exist, but because finding them requires a combination of geological knowledge, historical research, physical capability, and luck that few possess, and that may not be sufficient even when combined. Those who explore the mysterious tunnels will continue to find passages that do not fit comfortable explanations, artifacts that raise questions, and experiences that unsettle and disturb. Some of these will eventually be explained. Others will remain enigmatic, neither proven nor disproven, suspended in the space between the known and the unknown. The deaths will continue as well, because the underground is unforgiving, and because some will always push too far, risk too much, or simply encounter bad luck. The mountains do not care about human dreams or human lives, and they exact a price from those who fail to respect the danger. But the search will continue too, because the call of the mountains is strong and the lure of mystery is irresistible. Each generation will produce those who believe they have found the key that eluded their predecessors, who are certain that the next expedition will succeed where all others failed, who cannot resist the possibility that somewhere in the darkness and stone lies something extraordinary. The forbidden tunnels of the Sierra Nevada remain forbidden not primarily because of government restrictions or private property rights, though those play a role, but because the mountains themselves forbid easy access, easy understanding, and easy conclusions. They are forbidden in the older sense of the word, set apart, dangerous, imbued with power, places where the ordinary rules do not fully apply, and where those who enter must be prepared for consequences. This is not merely poetry or metaphor. It is a description of physical, psychological, and cultural reality. The underground of the Sierra Nevada is genuinely different, genuinely dangerous, and genuinely mysterious in ways that all our knowledge and technology have not eliminated. And perhaps that is as it should be. Perhaps the world needs places that resist complete mapping, complete understanding, complete control. Perhaps we need mountains that keep secrets, tunnels that do not reveal what lies at their end, and mysteries that endure across generations. The gold, if you find it, is valuable. But the search itself, the engagement with landscape and history and mystery, the willingness to venture into darkness, not knowing what you will find or whether you will return, the participation in a story that began long before you and will continue long after, that may be the greater treasure. The Sierra Nevada has stood for millions of years. It will stand for millions more. The tunnels beneath its surface, whether dug by miners in 1850 or by unknown hands in unknown times, are part of its story and ours. They connect us to the past, to those who came before, and to the fundamental human drive to explore, to search, to question, and to wonder. As long as the mountains stand, the tunnels will call to us. As long as gold glitters in the imagination and mystery draws the curious, people will venture into the depths, seeking what remains hidden. Some will find what they seek, most will not. But all who enter with respect, with preparation, and with awareness of the risks, participate in something larger than themselves. The forbidden tunnels of the Sierra Nevada are not merely physical spaces. They are thresholds between known and unknown, between surface and depth, between the mapped world and the wild. They are questions written in stone, invitations carved by time and human hands, mysteries that remain unsolved not because we have failed, but because some things are meant to resist easy answers. The mountains wait as they have always waited. The tunnels descend into darkness, as they have for centuries or millennia. The gold, if it exists, remains hidden, protected by stone and distance, and the mountain's infinite patience. And we, drawn by hope and curiosity, and the deep human need to know what lies beyond the edge of light, continue to search, to explore, to tell the stories, and to wonder. The Sierra Nevada keeps its secrets, but it offers something in return: the opportunity to participate in mystery, to test ourselves against genuine danger, to connect with a landscape that is older and more powerful than we are, and to experience, if only briefly, the humbling and exhilarating awareness that we do not know everything, that the world is still strange, and that there are still places where the unknown endures. That, perhaps, is the real treasure hidden in the forbidden tunnels: not gold, but wonder; not certainty, but possibility; not answers, but questions that matter enough to risk everything in pursuit of them. The mountains endure, the mysteries remain, and the search, with all its dangers and disappointments and rare, glorious discoveries, continues. This is the story of the forbidden tunnels of the Sierra Nevada, a story without ending, a question without final answer, and a mystery that remains, as it has always been, hidden in the darkness beneath the stone, waiting for those brave or foolish enough to seek it.